Hello guys, welcome to Cosmic Wand. So in this video, we will see Snape tried to break Harry's mind at age 11 but found a message, access denied, level 99 Occlumens. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Wall Behind Green Eyes. The castle swallowed them whole. Harry had thought the Great Hall would be the most overwhelming thing about Hogwarts, the floating candles, the enchanted ceiling bleeding with stars, the 4 impossibly long tables packed with students whose robes all looked the same until you noticed the colors. But it wasn't the hall. It wasn't the ghosts drifting through stone walls or the staircases that groaned and shifted like living things. It was the noise. Not the audible kind, not the chatter and the laughter and the clatter of goblets on old wood. There was something else, something underneath all of it, like a radio turned low in another room. A hum he could feel in his teeth. He'd always been good at reading rooms. You had to be, growing up at number 4 Privet Drive. You learned to gauge Uncle Vernon's mood from the weight of his footsteps on the stairs. You learned that Aunt Petunia's tight-lipped smile meant the neighbors were watching and you'd better not exist too loudly. You learned that Dudley's silence was more dangerous than his shouting, because silence meant he was planning something. So Harry noticed things. He noticed that the girl with the bushy hair, Hermione, who hadn't stopped talking since the train, was vibrating with a specific kind of terror that she'd papered over with encyclopedic knowledge. He noticed the red-headed boy, Ron, kept rubbing his nose when he was nervous, which was constantly. He noticed that the tall, pale boy who'd tried to shake his hand in Diagon Alley, Malfoy, carried himself like someone who'd been told since birth that the world was his dining table and everyone else was the help. But more than any of that, Harry noticed the teachers. The staff table sat elevated at the far end of the hall, and as Hagrid had walked them through the enormous doors, Harry had felt something shift. Not physically. It was like walking through a curtain of warm air into something cooler and sharper on the other side. His eyes had swept the table almost involuntarily, and faces had jumped out at him with strange clarity. A tiny wizard perched on a stack of books, beaming down at them. A stern woman in emerald robes whose mouth was set in a line so thin it could have cut glass. A man in a ludicrous purple turban who smelled, even from this distance, like garlic and something wrong. And at the far end, half hidden in shadow, a man dressed entirely in black, with a curtain of greasy dark hair and a face that looked like it had been carved for the express purpose of sneering. His eyes were already on Harry. Had been on him, Harry realized, since the moment he'd walked in. Harry looked away. The sorting began, and the noise underneath the noise grew louder. He couldn't make out words, it wasn't like hearing thoughts, nothing so clean as that. It was more like standing in a crowd where everyone was whispering at once, and you could feel the shape of what they were saying without catching the specifics. Excitement. Fear. Boredom from the older students. A sharp spike of something bitter from the dark-haired professor every time someone was sorted into Gryffindor. Potter, Harry. The whispers became a roar, the audible kind, this time. Every head in the hall turned. Harry walked forward on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, sat on the stool, and felt the brim of the sorting hat drop over his eyes, plunging him into darkness. And then a voice spoke inside his head. Well, well, well. It was conversational, almost amused, like an old man settling into a favorite chair. Harry felt the hat's consciousness press against his own, not aggressively, not like the dark-haired professor's gaze, but with a gentle, practiced ease. Like fingers rifling through a filing cabinet. Except the filing cabinet wouldn't open. Oh, said the hat. The amusement was gone. Oh, that's rather unusual. Harry sat very still. He didn't know what the hat was doing, exactly, but he could feel it, a pressure behind his forehead, soft at first, then firmer, like someone leaning against a locked door. I need to see your qualities, dear boy. Your memories, your desires, your fears. It's how this works. I've been doing it for 1,000 years. If you could just. Just what? Harry whispered under the brim. Let me in. The pressure increased. Harry felt his hands clench on the edges of the stool. Something inside him, something that had always been there, silent and enormous, like a wall built so deep into his foundation that he'd mistaken it for bedrock, pushed back. Not violently. Almost lazily. The way a mountain might shrug off a bird trying to land. The hat made a sound that, in a human, would have been a gasp. Merlin's bones. I've never, in 1,000 years, I have never, a pause. Harry could feel the hat recalibrating, approaching from a different angle, trying to find a crack, a gap, anything. There was nothing. Who built these walls, child? I don't know what you're talking about. No, the hat murmured, and now there was something almost reverent in its voice. No, I don't suppose you do. You've had them so long you don't even know they're there. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Can you just sort me? I can't see your mind, Mr. Potter. I'm working blind for the first time in my existence. So I'm going to have to do something rather undignified and simply, ask. What do you want? Harry thought about it. He thought about Ron on the train, offering him sandwiches. He thought about Malfoy's outstretched hand and the oily certainty behind his smile. He thought about the word brave and wondered what it meant when you'd spent 10 years being afraid and had simply gotten used to it. Not Slytherin, he said quietly. Not Slytherin. You know, you could do extraordinary things there. Whatever's locked inside that fortress of yours, Slytherin would teach you to use it. But you don't want power for its own sake, do you? No. You want something much more dangerous. What? A home. The word landed somewhere deep in Harry's chest, in a place the hat apparently could reach even if it couldn't read his thoughts. His throat tightened. Better be, Gryffindor. The last word exploded through the hall, and the Gryffindor table erupted. Harry pulled off the hat and handed it back to Professor McGonagall, whose thin mouth had curved into something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. The Weasley twins were chanting, "We got Potter," like a football song. Ron was grinning and thumping the bench beside him. Harry sat down. The hum beneath the noise settled into something warm. He allowed himself, very carefully, to smile. At the staff table, unnoticed by everyone except the boy who noticed everything, the man in black had stopped sneering. He was watching Harry with an expression that had shifted from contempt to something Harry couldn't name. And beside him, the man in the purple turban was watching too. His hands were clenched beneath the table, and the wrongness radiating off him had spiked like a fever. The first week passed in a blur of moving staircases, enchanted portraits that gossiped worse than Aunt Petunia, and the dawning realization that magic was both everything Harry had dreamed and absolutely nothing like he'd expected. Charms class was delightful. Tiny Professor Flitwick toppled off his stack of books when he read Harry's name, and Harry felt a burst of genuine, uncomplicated joy from the man that was almost infectious. Transfiguration was terrifying in the best way. Professor McGonagall turned her desk into a pig and back again without so much as blinking, and when she looked at Harry, he felt something steady and fierce behind her gaze, like a castle wall built to protect rather than imprison. History of magic was taught by a ghost who had apparently died mid-lecture and simply never stopped talking, which meant the hum of 30 students' wandering minds was louder than Professor Binns's droning. Harry spent most of that class learning to tune the noise out, pressing it down beneath his awareness like turning the volume knob on Dudley's television. He was getting better at that. Whatever the noise was, and he still didn't have a word for it, he was learning its rhythms. People's emotions came through clearest when they were strong. Neville Longbottom's anxiety was a constant low-frequency broadcast, Hermione's determination buzzed like a fluorescent light, and Ron's moods were as easy to read as weather, sunny and open one moment, cloudy with self-doubt the next. Harry couldn't hear words or specific thoughts, not exactly. It was more like sensing the shape of someone's emotional state, the way you could tell a song was sad even if you didn't speak the language. But Thursday was potions, and potions was in the dungeons, and the dungeons belonged to Professor Snape. Harry knew something was wrong the moment he descended the stairs. The corridor leading to the potions classroom was colder than the rest of the castle, not just in temperature but in something else, something that pressed against his skin like static before a thunderstorm. He could feel Snape before he saw him, a dark knot of tightly controlled emotion radiating from behind the closed classroom door. Bitterness. Old pain. And wrapped around all of it like barbed wire, a focused, deliberate hostility that was aimed, with surgical precision, at Harry. He paused on the last step. "You all right, mate?" Ron asked from behind him. "Fine," Harry said, and walked in. The classroom was exactly what you'd expect from a dungeon repurposed for education, stone walls lined with jars of things that floated in murky liquid, long wooden tables scarred by decades of cauldron burns, and a pervasive smell of sulfur and something herbal that Harry couldn't identify. The Slytherins were already seated on one side, Malfoy lounging in the front row with the boneless ease of someone who considered this territory already conquered. Snape swept in from a side door, robes billowing behind him like a black sail, and the room went silent. Not the gradual, settling quiet of McGonagall's class. Instant. Absolute. The man carried silence with him the way a storm carried wind. He didn't take attendance the normal way. He read names from a list, his voice flat and disinterested, until he reached one. "Ah, yes," Snape said, and his voice dropped half a register. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." A few Slytherins snickered. Malfoy smirked. Harry said nothing. He was watching Snape's eyes, black as ink, cold as the dungeon air, and feeling the knot of hostility tighten like a fist. Snape began the class with a speech about the subtle science and exact art of potion-making. Harry barely heard the words. He was too focused on the pressure building behind his own eyes, a sensation he'd felt once before, on the first night, in the Great Hall, when Snape had stared at him across the room. It was back, and it was stronger. Snape was doing something. Potter. The name cracked through the air like a whip. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry met his eyes. The pressure surged. It felt like someone pressing their thumb against the space between his eyebrows, not painful, exactly, but deeply, fundamentally invasive. Like someone trying to open a door that had been welded shut. "I don't know, sir." Snape's lip curled. "Tut, tut, fame clearly isn't everything." He took a step closer. "Let's try again. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" The pressure doubled. Harry's vision flickered at the edges, and for a split second, he felt something vast and cold brush against whatever was inside his head, that wall, that mountain, that thing the Sorting Hat couldn't get through. It was like feeling someone run their fingers along a locked vault door, searching for the combination. "I don't know, sir." "Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, Potter." Another step. Snape was close now, looming over Harry's desk, and his eyes were boring into Harry's with an intensity that had nothing to do with potions questions. The background noise, the hum of the other students' emotions, faded to nothing. All Harry could feel was Snape, pushing, throwing the full weight of his mind against, something cracked. Not in Harry. In Snape. The pressure didn't just stop. It reversed. Whatever wall lived inside Harry's skull didn't merely hold, it responded, like a sleeping dragon prodded one too many times. Harry felt a pulse of energy travel back along the invisible connection between them, and for a fraction of a second, he could have sworn he saw words hanging in the air between their locked gazes, shimmering like heat haze, access denied, level 99 Occlumens. Snape flinched. It was small, a tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible jerk of the head, as if someone had flicked him between the eyebrows. But Harry caught it. Of course he caught it. And in the instant of that flinch, Harry felt something leak through from the other side, shock. Pure, undiluted, almost childlike shock, the kind you feel when the ground you're standing on turns out not to be there. The moment passed. Snape straightened, his mask sliding back into place with the speed of long practice. But his hands, clasped behind his back, were trembling. Harry could see the faintest tremor in the fingers. "Clearly," Snape said, and his voice was almost, steady, a dunderhead like the rest. "For your information, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the draught of living death. A bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat and will save you from most poisons. Well, why aren't you all copying that down?" The class scrambled for quills. Snape turned away from Harry, and the absence of that pressure was like stepping out of a freezing wind into a warm room. Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Ron leaned over. "What a git," he whispered. "Don't let him get to you." Harry nodded. But he wasn't thinking about Snape's words. He was thinking about the flinch. About the way Snape's eyes had widened for just that fraction of a second, the way a man might look if he'd punched a wall and the wall had punched back. Something had happened. Something Snape hadn't expected. And from the way the professor was now very deliberately not looking at Harry, keeping his back turned, his attention fixed on the Slytherin side of the room, his voice just a shade too controlled, it had rattled him badly. The rest of the class was a masterpiece of petty cruelty. Snape criticized Harry's potion at every stage, deducted points for offenses so minor they bordered on imaginary, and held up Malfoy's work as an example of perfection despite the fact that Malfoy's cauldron was producing a faintly green smoke that Harry was fairly sure it wasn't supposed to. But through all of it, Snape never looked Harry in the eyes again. Not once. When the class ended, Harry packed his things slowly, watching Snape pretend to organize papers at his desk. The other students filed out, Ron hovering at the door with an impatient expression. "Go ahead," Harry said. "I'll catch up." "You sure? He looks like he wants to pickle you and put you in one of those jars." "I'm sure." Ron shrugged and left. The door swung shut. And for 3 long seconds, Harry and Snape were alone in the dungeon, and the silence between them was so heavy it had its own gravity. Snape spoke without turning around. "Get out, Potter." "Yes, sir." Harry walked to the door. His hand was on the iron handle when Snape's voice stopped him again. "Potter." Harry turned. Snape was standing at his desk, still not looking at him, one hand braced on the wooden surface as if he needed the support. In the gloomy light of the dungeon, his face looked almost gray. "Have you ever studied occlumency?" The word meant nothing to Harry. "No, sir." A muscle in Snape's jaw twitched. "Has anyone ever trained you? In mental disciplines? Meditation? Anything of that nature?" "No, sir. I grew up with muggles." Snape's hand tightened on the desk edge. His knuckles went white. For a moment, Harry felt the hum again, that undercurrent of emotion bleeding through, and what he felt from Snape was so complicated, so layered with contradictions, that it made his head swim. Hatred and fascination and something that might have been fear, all braided together so tightly they were almost indistinguishable. "Get out," Snape said again, and this time there was no follow-up. Harry got out. He walked through the dungeon corridor in a daze, his mind turning over the encounter like a Rubik's cube. The pressure behind his eyes. The flinch. The word occlumency, which sounded like it should mean something important. And underneath all of it, a question that had been following him since the Sorting Hat had pressed against his thoughts and bounced off: what is inside my head? He found Ron waiting at the top of the stairs, trying to look casual and failing spectacularly. "He didn't give you another detention, did he?" "We've only had one class, it'd have to be some kind of record." "No. He just asked me something weird." "Weird how?" Harry hesitated. He didn't know how to explain it, any of it. The pressure, the wall, the flinch, the strange question. It all felt private, not in the sense that he was embarrassed, but in the sense that it felt dangerous, like a secret that could change everything if the wrong person heard it. "He asked if I'd studied something called occlumency." Ron's face was blank. Never heard of it. Sounds like something Hermione would know. Yeah, Harry said slowly. Maybe. But he didn't ask Hermione. Not that night, and not for a long time after. Something told him, that same instinct that had kept him alive at the Dursleys, that had taught him when to duck and when to stay silent and when to run, that this was a card he should keep close to his chest. He lay in bed that night, curtains drawn around his four-poster, listening to Neville's snoring and Ron's mumbling and the ancient creaks of Gryffindor Tower settling around him like a living thing. The hum was there, as always, fainter at night, when people's conscious minds quieted and their dreams took over, turning the noise into something softer and more abstract, like music heard through water. He closed his eyes and, for the first time, turned his attention inward. Not to the noise outside, but to whatever was generating the silence inside. He didn't know what occlumency was. He didn't know what the Sorting Hat had felt or what Snape had hit. But he could feel it now, if he concentrated, a vastness behind his thoughts, like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark and knowing the drop was enormous even though you couldn't see it. It was warm. It was solid. And it was his. "What are you?" he whispered to the darkness behind his own eyes. The darkness didn't answer. But it pulsed, once, like a heartbeat, and Harry felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years of sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs. Safe. 3 floors below and half a castle away, Severus Snape sat in his office with a tumbler of fire whiskey in one hand and a quill in the other, and tried to make his fingers stop shaking long enough to write. The office was exactly as austere as the man who occupied it, stone walls bare of decoration, shelves lined with jars of ingredients organized with pathological precision, a single lamp burning low on the desk. The only personal touch was a photograph, hidden in a drawer he never opened, of a girl with red hair and green eyes laughing in a summer field. Green eyes. Lily's eyes. Staring at him from James Potter's face, and behind them, Snape set down the quill and pressed his palms against his eyes. In 20 years of practicing legilimency, through the Dark Lord's tutelage, through the war, through reading the minds of Death Eaters and Order members and frightened students who thought cheating on exams was the height of rebellion, Severus Snape had never encountered anything like what he'd hit inside Harry Potter's skull. It wasn't occlumency. He knew occlumency. He'd taught it, practiced it, built his own shields layer by meticulous layer over decades until even the Dark Lord had to work to breach them. Occlumency was a skill. It was walls built brick by brick, maintained through discipline and willpower, and it always, always, had a texture. You could feel the craftsmanship. You could feel the builder's personality in the architecture of their defenses. What he'd felt in Potter's mind was not built. It was grown. Organic. Vast beyond comprehension, like pressing his hand against the roots of a mountain and feeling it go down forever. There was no craftsmanship because there was no craftsman, the shield simply was, as natural and immovable as gravity. And when he'd pushed too hard, when he'd thrown the full force of his not inconsiderable legilimency against it, the wall had, Snape's hand went to his temple, where a headache still throbbed like a second heartbeat. The wall had spoken to him. Access denied, level 99 Occlumens. Not Potter's voice. Not any human voice. Something older, something that tasted of ancient magic and ozone and a power so deeply embedded in the boy's psyche that Potter himself clearly had no idea it existed. Snape had felt the boy's confusion, his surface-level bewilderment at the questions being thrown at him. Potter didn't know what occlumency was. He wasn't consciously defending himself. The defense was autonomous, a magical immune system of staggering power, operating entirely without its host's awareness. How? How? Snape picked up the quill again. He stared at the parchment for a long moment, then began to write. Headmaster, I must speak with you urgently regarding the Potter boy. Something is very wrong. Or very right. I cannot yet determine which. During today's lesson, I attempted a standard surface-level legilimency probe, the same technique I employ on all new students to establish a baseline behavioral assessment. The results were. He paused. What word was sufficient? Unprecedented. The boy's mind is shielded. Not in any manner I have previously encountered. This is not trained occlumency. I have no framework for what this is. I pushed harder than I should have, I know, spare me the lecture, and the shield responded with what I can only describe as a sentient defense mechanism. It projected a message directly into my consciousness. The words were clear: access denied, level 99 Occlumens. I do not know what level 99 signifies. I do not know who or what placed this protection on the boy's mind. But I know this: there is no 11-year-old alive, no wizard alive, possibly no wizard who has ever lived, with natural mental shields of this magnitude. We need to talk. Tonight. SS. He folded the parchment, sealed it with a tap of his wand, and sent it winging through the door and up toward the headmaster's tower, where Albus Dumbledore was undoubtedly sitting in his ridiculous overstuffed armchair, sucking on a lemon drop and thinking he had all the answers. Not this time, Snape thought. Not about this boy. He opened the drawer. Looked at the photograph. Lily's green eyes laughed up at him from 20 years ago, frozen in a moment of joy that he had carried like a shard of glass in his chest ever since. Her son had those eyes. The same eyes. And behind them, something that had slammed the greatest legilimens in Britain out of his mind like a bouncer ejecting a drunk from a pub. What did you do, Lily? Snape whispered. What did you leave in that boy? The photograph didn't answer. It just kept laughing, forever, in a summer that had ended a long time ago. Snape closed the drawer, drained his fire whiskey, and went to find Dumbledore. Above him, in Gryffindor Tower, Harry Potter slept. And for the first time in his life, nothing crept into his dreams uninvited. The wall stood guard, silent and ancient and absolute, and behind it, an 11-year-old boy with 2 big glasses and a lightning bolt scar dreamed of nothing at all. Not even Voldemort could have gotten through. Not yet. Not ever. Chapter 2, What the Headmaster Couldn't See. The owl arrived at breakfast on a Tuesday, 3 weeks into term. Harry was halfway through a slice of toast, listening to Ron explain the finer points of Quidditch positioning for the 4th time that week, when a tawny school owl dropped a small square of parchment directly into his orange juice. The note was written in looping violet ink that seemed to shimmer when you tilted it, and it smelled faintly of lemon. Dear Harry, I wonder if you might join me for a cup of tea this evening after supper. I find that new students often have questions they're too polite to ask at the staff table, and I have a rather excellent tin of biscuits that needs attending to. The password is Sherbet Lemon. Yours warmly, Professor Dumbledore. Ron read it over his shoulder and nearly choked on a sausage. Dumbledore? The headmaster wants to have tea with you. Blimey, Harry. Fred and George have been here 5 years and they've never been invited up. What you reckon he wants? No idea, Harry said, but that wasn't entirely true. He'd been watching Dumbledore. Not deliberately, not the way he watched Snape, with that tight, defensive awareness that switched on the moment the potions master entered a room. With Dumbledore, it was subtler. The headmaster appeared at meals, twinkled benevolently at the student body, and occasionally made announcements that seemed designed to be slightly absurd. He gave every impression of a kindly, somewhat dotty old man whose primary concerns were sweets and socks. But Harry could feel him. Not all the time. Not the constant low broadcast he got from the students around him, whose emotions were as unguarded as open windows. Dumbledore was different. His presence in the hum was muted, controlled, like a voice deliberately speaking just below the threshold of hearing. Most of the time, Harry couldn't read him at all. But twice in the past 3 weeks, he'd caught the headmaster looking at him across the great hall, and in those moments, he'd felt something reach toward him across the distance. Light. Careful. So gentle it could almost be mistaken for imagination. Almost. Someone was asking questions about him, Harry realized. Someone wanted to see what was inside his head. Snape had been a battering ram. This felt like a lockpick. You should go, Hermione said from across the table, where she'd been pretending not to eavesdrop while reading Hogwarts, a history for what Harry suspected was the third time. Professor Dumbledore is considered one of the greatest wizards of the modern age. He defeated Grindelwald in 1945, he's the chief warlock of the Wizengamot, the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of, yeah, alright, Hermione, we get it, he's dead impressive, Ron said. But why is he asking Harry for tea? He doesn't invite first-years up for a chat. Hermione bit her lip. Harry could feel her thinking, really thinking, turning it over with that relentless analytical engine she carried between her ears. Maybe he's just being kind. Harry is famous, after all. Perhaps Dumbledore wants to make sure he's settling in. Perhaps, Harry said. He folded the note and put it in his pocket, and he didn't say what he was actually thinking, which was, he wants what Snape wanted. He just plans to be politer about it. The day crawled. Double herbology in the morning, during which Harry repotted a plant that kept trying to strangle Neville and felt nothing more alarming from the hum than Professor Sprout's steady, earth-toned warmth. Then history of magic, which was the mental equivalent of being slowly lowered into a vat of warm porridge. Binz's ghostly droning created a sort of white noise that actually made Harry's passive perception easier, as though the boredom cleared away static and let him tune more carefully into the people around him. He'd been experimenting. Quietly, carefully, with the same patience he'd learned from years of doing nothing in his cupboard. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd mapped the basic emotional signatures of nearly every person he spent time with, and he was getting better at filtering. Ron was the easiest, his feelings were bold, primary color emotions that broadcast like a signal fire. Happy, hungry, nervous, loyal, jealous, Ron felt everything at full volume and hid nothing. Harry liked that about him. There was a deep comfort in being around someone whose inner life matched his outer life so completely. Hermione was more complex. On the surface, she projected confidence and certainty, the brisk efficiency of someone who believed that every problem could be solved with sufficient research. But underneath, there was a constant undercurrent of anxiety, a fear of failure, of being wrong, of being insufficient, that ran so deep Harry sometimes wondered if she even knew it was there. She covered it well. The wall of knowledge she'd built around herself was almost as impressive as whatever lived inside Harry's own skull, though hers was made of books instead of magic. Neville Longbottom was awound walking around in school robes. The boy radiated insecurity the way a campfire radiated heat, constantly, in every direction, impossible to miss. But there was something else underneath it, something stubborn and quiet and strong, like a seed buried under concrete that still somehow intended to grow. Harry had taken to sitting next to Neville in the classes they shared, partly because Neville needed someone who wouldn't make fun of him, and partly because that buried strength fascinated Harry. It reminded him of himself. Malfoy was ice and performance. Every emotion the blonde boy projected was calculated, curated, designed for an audience. The sneer, the swagger, the casual cruelty, it was all surface, and beneath it Harry could feel something he hadn't expected, a desperate, almost frantic need for approval. Not from his friends. From somewhere else. Someone else. A presence that loomed over Malfoy's emotional landscape like a shadow over snow, cold and demanding and utterly without warmth. His father, Harry guessed. He knew what it was like to live under someone's expectations. His had just been the expectation of invisibility rather than greatness. But none of them, not Ron, not Hermione, not Malfoy, not even Snape, unsettled Harry the way Quirrell did. Defense against the dark arts was on Wednesdays, and from the moment Harry had walked into his first lesson, every instinct he possessed had started screaming. It wasn't Quirrell's stutter, which was so exaggerated it sounded rehearsed. It wasn't the garlic, which Quirrell claimed was to ward off a vampire he'd met in Romania. It was the hum. Everyone had one. A unique emotional frequency, as identifiable as a fingerprint. Harry had catalogued dozens of them by now. But Quirrell had two. The first was weak, trembling, pale as watered-down milk, the signature of a timid, frightened man who jumped at loud noises and apologized for his own existence. That was the surface Quirrell, the one the rest of the school saw. But beneath it, coiled tight and impossibly contained, was something else. Something dark. Something that didn't feel like Quirrell at all, because it didn't feel entirely human. It was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature, the kind of cold that lived in places light had never reached. And it was aware. Harry could feel it noticing things, calculating, even as Quirrell stammered his way through a lecture on defensive jinxes. The first time Harry had felt it, during that initial defense class, he'd nearly dropped his wand. The dark signature had pulsed, just once, a lazy, predatory ripple, and Harry's scar had burned. A bright, thin line of pain, there and gone in a second, like someone pressing a heated needle to his forehead. He hadn't told anyone about that either. By the time evening came, Harry had worked himself into a state of quiet alertness that probably would have been called anxiety in anyone else. He ate supper mechanically, barely tasting the shepherd's pie, and when Ron asked if he wanted company walking to Dumbledore's office, Harry shook his head. "It's fine. I'll tell you everything when I get back. Even if he shows you some mad secret room full of magical artifacts. Especially then." He found the gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office on the second floor, or rather, he found it after 20 minutes of wrong turns and one extremely unhelpful conversation with a portrait of a medieval witch who insisted on giving him directions in rhyming couplets. "Sherbet lemon," Harry said, and the gargoyle leapt aside to reveal a spiral staircase that moved upward on its own, like a stone escalator. The office at the top was extraordinary. Circular, cluttered, alive with the whirring and puffing of dozens of silver instruments Harry couldn't identify. Portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses lined the walls, most of them pretending to be asleep. A magnificent scarlet and gold bird sat on a perch near the window, watching Harry with eyes that held an intelligence far beyond animal. And behind a massive claw-footed desk, Albus Dumbledore sat in a high-backed chair, smiling as though Harry's arrival was the highlight of his week. "Harry. Do come in, sit down. Tea. I have Earl Grey, Darjeeling, and something Hagrid brought me from his last trip that I suspect may actually be soil, but I didn't have the heart to tell him." "Earl Grey's fine, sir." "Thank you." Harry sat in the chair across from the desk. It was comfortable, suspiciously comfortable, the kind of chair designed to make you relax and let your guard down. He noted this and did not relax. Dumbledore poured tea from a pot that refilled itself and pushed a tin of ginger newts across the desk. His movements were unhurried, grandfatherly, perfectly calibrated to project warmth and safety. The half-moon spectacles caught the lamplight as he settled back in his chair, and behind them, those blue eyes twinkled with what appeared to be nothing more than benign interest. "How are you finding Hogwarts, Harry? I imagine it's been quite an adjustment, coming from a Muggle household." "It's brilliant, sir. I love it here." That was true. Purely, simply true. Whatever else was happening, the hum, the wall, the thing in Quirrell's head, Hogwarts was the first place Harry had ever felt like he belonged. The castle itself seemed to welcome him, its corridors rearranging themselves to guide him where he needed to go, its magic humming a frequency that harmonized with whatever lived inside his skull. "I'm glad to hear it." Dumbledore took a sip of tea. "And your classes? I hope our professors have been treating you well." Harry felt it then. The lightest touch, barely there at all, like a butterfly landing on the back of his hand. It came from Dumbledore's direction, a gossamer thin tendril of something reaching across the space between them and pressing, so gently, against Harry's awareness. "They've been great," Harry said, keeping his voice even. "Professor McGonagall is amazing. Professor Flitwick too. And Professor Snape." The tendril pressed slightly harder. Still featherlight, still deniable, but Harry could feel the intent behind it now, a seeking, probing curiosity that was trying to slip beneath his conscious awareness and observe what lay underneath. It was masterful. If Harry hadn't spent 3 weeks learning to feel the hum, learning to distinguish between ambient emotional noise and directed intent, he never would have noticed. But he noticed. "Professor Snape's class is challenging, sir." "I'm doing my best." "I'm sure you are." Dumbledore smiled, and the tendril shifted, not pushing harder, but changing angle, trying to find a way around rather than through. Like water testing a dam for cracks. Severus can be demanding. But he is an excellent potions master, and I assure you, his intentions toward his students are always educational. Harry said nothing. He took a biscuit and bit into it, using the pause to focus inward. He could feel the wall now, not just as a vague sense of something there but as a presence, enormous and patient, doing exactly what it had done with Snape. Holding. Simply holding. The butterfly-like touch from Dumbledore pressed against it and found nothing. No gap, no seam, no weakness. Just mountain. Dumbledore's blue eyes changed. It was fast, so fast that anyone not watching for it would have missed it entirely. The twinkle didn't disappear, it sharpened, like the glint of light on a blade rather than a bauble. For a single heartbeat, the genial grandfather vanished and something else looked out through those spectacles. Something ancient. Something that had fought dark wizards and won wars and carried secrets heavy enough to crush lesser men. Something that was, in this moment, profoundly and unmistakably startled. Then it was gone. The twinkle returned. The grandfather was back. But Harry had seen it, and the knowledge settled in his chest like a stone. He tried. And he couldn't get through either. "More tea, Harry?" "Yes, please, sir." Dumbledore poured. His hand was perfectly steady, not a tremor, not a flicker. Whatever he'd felt, whatever the wall had shown him, he'd processed it and locked it away in the time it took to lift a teapot. Harry felt a grudging respect for that. Snape had flinched. Dumbledore hadn't even blinked. "I wanted to ask you something, Harry, if you don't mind." Dumbledore set down the teapot and folded his long fingers together. "How much do you know about your parents?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Harry felt ripples spread through his own emotional landscape, longing, anger, grief, all the things he usually kept compressed and silent in the space behind his wall. "Not much, sir. The Dursleys told me they died in a car crash. Hagrid told me the truth." A flicker of something crossed Dumbledore's face. Something that, had Harry been less guarded, might have looked like guilt. "Yes. Hagrid can always be relied upon for honesty, if not always for discretion. Your parents were remarkable people, Harry. Your father was brave and loyal and occasionally reckless in a way that drove his professors to distraction. And your mother." Dumbledore paused. The blue eyes softened, and for a moment, the thing Harry felt from the old man wasn't calculation or curiosity. It was genuine warmth, and something deeper, sadder, that tasted like the particular grief of someone who has outlived too many people they cared about. "Your mother was extraordinary. Brilliant. Kind. Fierce in her convictions. And possessed of a capacity for love that I have rarely seen equaled in all my years." Harry's throat tightened. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he didn't. "I tell you this," Dumbledore continued gently, "because I want you to know that whatever you encounter here at Hogwarts, whatever challenges arise, whatever questions you have, you are not alone. Your parents' legacy is not just fame. It is a community of people who love them and who will look after their son." It was a nice speech. It was kind and warm and exactly what an orphan needed to hear. And underneath it, Harry felt Dumbledore try one more time, the subtlest probe yet, riding on the emotion of the moment, slipping in through the gap that grief and longing should have opened. Should have. Didn't. The wall held. It always held. Dumbledore picked up his teacup, and Harry could have sworn the old man's eyes flickered down for just a moment, a rapid, involuntary glance, as though he were looking at something he hadn't expected to find. Or rather, not finding something he'd expected to be there. "Well," Dumbledore said, and his voice was as light and cheerful as ever. I believe I've kept you long enough. Gryffindor Tower awaits, and I'm told the common room fire is particularly pleasant on September evenings. Thank you for the tea, sir. Harry stood, then hesitated. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe the talk about his mother had loosened something, or maybe the instinct that had guided him through a decade with the Dursleys was pushing him to establish the boundaries of this relationship early. Professor? Yes, Harry. Can I ask you something? You may always ask. I reserve the right to not answer, but you may always ask. Why did you really invite me here tonight? Dumbledore regarded him over the rim of his spectacles. The silence stretched. The silver instruments whirred and puffed. The phoenix on its perch let out a low, warbling note that sounded like a question. Because I wanted to see you for myself, Dumbledore said at last, and for the first time all evening, Harry felt the absolute truth of his words, no manipulation, no maneuvering, just an old man trying to understand. I owed your parents that much. Harry nodded slowly. Good night, Professor. Good night, Harry. He left. The spiral staircase carried him down, the gargoyle closed behind him, and he stood in the corridor for a long moment, breathing in the cool castle air and trying to sort through everything he'd felt. Dumbledore had tried 3 times. 3 different approaches, the gentle probe, the lateral approach, the emotional ambush, and all 3 had bounced off the same wall that had rejected Snape. But where Snape had pushed hard and gotten thrown back, Dumbledore had been subtle enough that the wall barely had to respond. He'd simply found no entrance and withdrawn, each time so smoothly that someone without Harry's sensitivity would never have known anything had happened. The man was good. Very, very good. And that made him far more dangerous than Snape, because Snape's hostility was obvious, which meant it was manageable. Dumbledore's warmth was a weapon too, and you couldn't guard against a weapon you didn't know was being wielded. Harry filed this away in the vast, organized silence of his mind, and went back to Gryffindor Tower. Severus Snape had not slept properly in 3 weeks. The meeting with Dumbledore on that first night had gone exactly as he'd predicted, badly. The headmaster had listened to his account with that infuriating placidity, read the note twice, asked precisely the wrong questions. Are you certain you weren't simply off your game, Severus? And then told him to be patient and observe. Patient. Snape wanted to hurl something. Preferably something breakable, preferably at the old man's head. He was not being patient. He was researching. The restricted section had yielded 3 texts on advanced occlumency, all of which he'd already read years ago, and none of which contained anything remotely applicable to what he'd encountered in Potter's mind. The Architecture of Mental Shields by Griselda Marchbanks described 7 tiers of occlumency mastery. Tier 7, the highest, was described as a fortress of such complexity that only the most powerful legilimens might hope to breach it, and even then only with sustained effort. Marchbanks estimated that perhaps a dozen living wizards could achieve Tier 7. What Snape had felt in Potter's mind wasn't Tier 7. It wasn't on the scale at all. It was like comparing a castle to the planet the castle was built on. He'd sent owls to 3 contacts on the continent, former colleagues from his days in the Dark Lord's service who had transitioned, as he had, into more respectable pursuits. One was a mind healer in Vienna. One was a curse-breaker in Cairo. One was a very old witch in the mountains of northern Romania who was rumored to have been practicing legilimency since before Grindelwald's rise. The mind healer had written back first, natural occlumency of that magnitude is not documented in any clinical literature I am aware of. Are you certain the subject is not a metamorphmagus or other variant type? Some shapeshifters develop unconscious mental shields as a byproduct of their fluid identity. Otherwise, I would suggest a thorough examination for signs of external enchantment. The curse breaker had been more blunt, sounds like someone layered protections on the kid. Have you checked him for ancient Egyptian mental warding? Some of the old pharaonic mind locks project warning messages to intruders. Could be something similar. The Romanian which hadn't replied yet. Snape suspected she was either dead or simply uninterested. Possibly both. External enchantment. That was the theory Dumbledore favored, though he hadn't said so in as many words. The implication had been clear: Lily's sacrifice, the love that had destroyed the Dark Lord's body, might have left more than a scar. It might have armored the boy's mind as thoroughly as it had armored his skin. Snape hated this theory. He hated it because it was probably correct, and because it meant that Lily Evans, dead for 10 years, beyond his reach forever, was still protecting her son in ways that made every living wizard look like an amateur. Even in death, she was extraordinary. Even in death, she was better than all of them. He stood in his office on a cold Tuesday night, the same night Dumbledore had invited Potter for tea, and stared at the single lamp on his desk and tried to think clearly through the fog of exhaustion and obsession. The message. Access denied, level 99 Occlumens. He'd turned those words over 10,000 times. The phrasing was wrong for any magical tradition he knew. It was too modern, too blunt, almost mechanical. Ancient protection spoke in runes or riddles. Goblin curses hissed threats. Even the Dark Lord's mental traps were baroque and theatrical. But this had been clean, clinical, almost digital in its precision. Level 99. As if there were a scale. As if mind magic could be quantified like a Muggle measurement, ranked and numbered and categorized. It was absurd. It was impossible. And it suggested something that kept Snape up at night: the protection wasn't just strong. It was intelligent. It had assessed his intrusion, classified it, and responded with a targeted message designed to communicate exactly one thing: you are outclassed beyond measure. Do not try again. A knock at his office door pulled him out of his spiral. Enter. It was Dumbledore. The old man ducked through the low doorway, the tip of his pointed hat brushing the stone lintel, and settled himself in Snape's visitor's chair without waiting for an invitation. He was carrying 2 cups of something that steamed and smelled of chamomile. He set one on Snape's desk. "I didn't ask for tea," Snape said. "And yet tea is what you need. You look dreadful, Severus. Your concern is touching. How was your little chat with the boy?" Dumbledore took a slow sip. The silver instruments on his shelves caught the lamplight. Wait, those were Snape's shelves, and there were no instruments, just potion ingredients. The old man had a way of making any room feel like his office simply by sitting in it. "Illuminating," Dumbledore said. Snape waited. When no elaboration came, he leaned forward. "You tried." "I did." "And?" Dumbledore set down his cup. For a moment, the twinkle faded, and the man behind it looked every one of his 150 years. "It is as you described. Perhaps more so. I have never, in all my years, encountered mental defenses of that nature. They are not constructed. They are not maintained. They simply exist, as fundamentally a part of the boy as his bones." "The sacrifice," Snape said flatly. "Almost certainly. Lily's protection operates on a level of magic that I confess I do not fully understand. We know it shields him physically, the Dark Lord could not touch him. It seems logical that the same protection extends to his mind. Perhaps even more powerfully, given that mental intrusion is a more intimate violation than physical attack." Snape's jaw tightened. "Logical. You're speculating." "I am reasoning from available evidence, which is what one does when one's primary investigative tool," Dumbledore tapped his temple, "has been rendered useless. I could not read the boy, Severus. Not a whisper. Not even the surface thoughts that most people broadcast without awareness. His mind is not simply shielded. It is silent. I was sitting 3 feet from an 11-year-old child, and I might as well have been sitting across from an empty chair." Something about the way Dumbledore said this, the careful, measured calm of a man describing something that frightened him, made Snape's skin prickle. Dumbledore was not easily unsettled. The man had dueled Grindelwald at the height of his power, had faced the Dark Lord across a battlefield, had navigated 50 years of political machinations with the serene confidence of someone playing chess against opponents who were still learning checkers. If Dumbledore was unsettled. "What aren't you telling me?" Snape asked. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Outside the office, the dungeon corridor was silent except for the faint drip of water on stone. When the headmaster spoke again, his voice was lower. "He knew, Severus." "Knew what?" "That I was probing. He couldn't name it, he doesn't have the vocabulary yet. But he felt it. I saw it in his eyes, the moment I made each attempt. A sharpening. A watchfulness. He was tracking my intrusions without understanding what they were, and he was categorizing them. I could see him filing the information away." Snape stared. "He's a passive Occlumens. That is my suspicion. Not a trained one, there's nothing deliberate about it. But the same mechanism that shields his mind may also be granting him an ambient awareness of other minds. He's picking up emotional signatures, reading intentions, sensing deception. At 11 years old, without a day of training, he is doing instinctively what most Occlumens spend decades learning to do consciously." The dungeon felt colder. Snape picked up the chamomile tea and drank, not because he wanted it but because his hands needed something to do. "Does he know what he is?" "No. And therein lies our dilemma." Dumbledore folded his hands in his lap. "If we tell him, we risk accelerating a power that is currently developing at its own natural pace. If we train him, we risk shaping him into something we don't intend. And if we do nothing? If we do nothing, someone else will find out," Snape finished. "The Dark Lord may be diminished, but he is not gone. If he learns that the boy who destroyed him carries mental shields of this magnitude, shields that could potentially block even the killing curse's psychic component, then he will become obsessed with breaking them." "Yes." They looked at each other across the desk. Two men who had spent a decade circling the same ghost, the boy's mother, from opposite sides of a war, bound together by guilt and duty and a shared, unspoken terror of what was coming. "Watch him. As you have been. But carefully, Severus, no more forced probes. Whatever is guarding that boy's mind does not distinguish between a curious professor and a hostile attacker. Next time, it may do more than send a message." "You think it could be dangerous?" "I think," Dumbledore said, rising from the chair with the deliberate grace of a man whose joints ached but whose dignity refused to acknowledge it, "that Lily Potter gave her life to protect her son, and that the magic born from that sacrifice has had 10 years to grow, unrestricted and unobserved, inside the mind of a child who was raised in an environment that demanded he learn to hide his thoughts and feelings simply to survive. I think the Dursleys, in their cruelty, may have accidentally forged the most powerful Occlumens in recorded history." He paused at the door. "And I think we should be very, very grateful that he is a kind boy. Because if he weren't, Severus, I'm not sure any of us could stop him." The door closed softly behind him. Snape sat alone in the lamplight, turning the empty teacup in his hands, and thought about Lily Evans laughing in a summer field. About a wall that spoke in a language no magical tradition recognized. About an 11-year-old boy with green eyes who could feel lies the way other people felt rain. And about the thing wrapped around Quirrell's skull, the thing Snape had been watching since the start of term with increasing unease, that was, even now, reaching tendrils of dark consciousness through the castle, searching, for a way into the mind of the boy who had destroyed it. Good luck, Snape thought savagely. You'll need it. He rinsed the teacup, extinguished the lamp, and went to bed. He didn't sleep. But at least this time, it wasn't the boy keeping him awake. It was the dawning, terrible realization that Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, the man with the plan, the chess master who always saw 12 moves ahead, had looked at Harry Potter and, for the first time in Severus Snape's memory, hadn't known what to do. That was what frightened him more than the wall. More than the message. More than the impossible, ancient power nesting inside an 11-year-old's head. Dumbledore was guessing. And in a world where the Dark Lord was inching back toward power, where a shard of his consciousness rode behind a professor's turban, and where the only weapon against him was a boy whose mind was a locked box that nobody, not Snape, not Dumbledore, not even the boy himself, could open. Guessing wasn't good enough. Harry lay in bed that night and listened to the castle breathe. It did breathe, he was sure of it now. Not in the way a person breathed, with lungs and rhythm, but in the way a forest breathed, with slow, vast exhalations of magic that pulsed through the stones and the air and the ancient wards that held the whole impossible structure together. He could feel it in the hum, a deep bass note beneath the higher frequencies of human thought and emotion, steady and patient and alive. The common room had been warm and loud when he'd returned from Dumbledore's office. Ron had peppered him with questions, and Harry had answered honestly, mostly. He'd described the office, the Phoenix, the biscuits, the conversation about his parents. He'd left out the parts where the headmaster of Hogwarts had tried to read his mind 3 times and failed. So he just wanted a chat. Ron had looked faintly disappointed. No secret missions. No magical objects of untold power. Just tea, Ron. Rubbish. I bet he's testing you for something. Fred says Dumbledore always has a reason. Fred was right, Harry thought. Dumbledore always had a reason. The question was whether his reasons and Harry's well-being were the same thing. He'd retreated to bed early, pleading tiredness, and now he lay with the curtains drawn and his glasses off, staring at the blurred canopy above him and turning the evening over in his mind. Dumbledore's 3 probes, each one more sophisticated than the last. The moment the old man's eyes had changed, that flash of sharpened steel behind the twinkle. The truth in his voice when he'd said he wanted to see Harry for himself. He thought about Snape, too. 3 weeks since potions, and the man still wouldn't look him in the eyes. Harry had thought at first that Snape simply hated him, the son of a rival, the spitting image of the father he'd despised. And maybe that was part of it. But there was more. Harry could feel Snape's attention on him in the Great Hall, in the corridors, a dark, focused watchfulness that tasted less of hatred than of desperate curiosity. Snape wanted to understand. He'd punched a wall, the wall had punched back, and now he couldn't stop staring at it, running his hands over it, trying to figure out what it was made of. And then there was Quirrell. Harry's hand went to his scar. It hadn't burned since that first defense class, not exactly. But it itched. A low, persistent awareness, like a tooth that wasn't quite aching. Quirrell's double signal was always there when they were in the same room, the weak, trembling surface personality and the dark thing coiled beneath, and Harry had started noticing patterns. The dark signature was strongest when Quirrell thought no one was watching. It surged during quiet moments, meals, corridors, the spaces between classes where a man might lower his guard. And it was interested in Harry. Not the way Snape was interested, with that anguished academic intensity. This interest was cold and evaluative, the way a predator assessed prey. Harry didn't know what the dark thing was. He didn't have the knowledge or the context to name it. But his instincts, those Dursley forged, survival-honed instincts that had kept him whole through 10 years of neglect, told him one thing with absolute clarity, that dark thing was the most dangerous presence in this castle. More dangerous than Snape. More dangerous than whatever was on the forbidden third-floor corridor that Dumbledore had warned them about. And it was living inside a professor's head, hiding in plain sight, watching Harry with the patient attention of something that had all the time in the world. He should tell someone. He knew he should. Dumbledore, McGonagall, even Hagrid, any of the adults who were supposed to be responsible for his safety. But every time he considered it, he ran into the same problem. How do you explain something you don't have words for? Professor, the defense teacher feels wrong, wasn't exactly actionable intelligence. And the deeper problem, the one he didn't like to examine too closely, he didn't fully trust anyone yet. Dumbledore had tried to read his mind. Snape had tried harder. The adults in this castle were playing games Harry couldn't see, and until he understood the rules, he wasn't giving anyone information they hadn't earned. So he kept it to himself. He watched, he listened, he felt. And the wall inside his head, that vast, warm, impossible thing, stood guard over all of it, keeping his secrets safe from a world that seemed determined to pry them loose. The hum settled into its nighttime register. Dreams beginning to bloom around the tower, soft and strange and full of the particular magic that happened when young witches and wizards slept in an ancient castle and their unconscious minds mingled with 1,000 years of enchantment. Harry could feel them, not the content, just the shape. Neville's dreams were anxious, full of sharp edges and soft landings. Ron's were warm and formless, golden. Seamus Finnegan's crackled with the energy of small, contained explosions, which seemed about right. Harry closed his eyes and pressed his awareness inward, toward the wall. It was there, as always, vast, patient, pulsing with a warmth that he had begun to recognize as love, though he couldn't have said whose or what kind. It didn't speak to him. It didn't project messages or give him instructions. It simply existed, a perfect barrier between his inner self and the world, and when he rested against it, he felt the same thing he'd felt that first night. Safe. Utterly, completely safe. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, pressed against the warm inner surface of the wall, Harry could feel the faintest vibration, like voices heard through stone. Not the hum. Something else. The wall was resonating with something, picking up a frequency so faint and so distant that it might have been imagination. But it wasn't. Harry had learned to trust his perceptions, even the impossible ones. Especially the impossible ones. The vibration pulsed. And for just a moment, a single shattered instant, Harry caught something, not a word, not a thought, but an image, bleeding through the wall from somewhere far away. A dark room. A cracked mirror. A face that was not a face, pale and serpentine, with red eyes that burned like embers in a dead hearth. And the image was looking at him. Harry's eyes snapped open. His heart was hammering. His scar throbbed once, bright and sharp, then subsided. The dormitory was silent. The hum was peaceful. Nothing moved. He stared at the canopy and pressed his hand against his forehead, over the scar, and felt the wall inside his head seal shut like a vault door, closing out whatever that image had been, locking it away in the dark. "Why can I hear them thinking?" he whispered to the empty air. The castle breathed. The magic hummed. And behind the wall, something ancient and protective stirred in its sleep, rolled over, and went on guarding its charge, the small, scarred boy who didn't know what he was yet, but was learning faster than anyone realized. In a classroom on the far side of the castle, Quirinus Quirrell sat in the dark, alone, gripping the edges of his desk so hard the wood creaked. The turban on his head was unwound just slightly at the back, and from the gap, a voice that was not his whispered into the empty room. "The boy felt me." Quirrell shuddered. "Master, I'm sure it was nothing, he's just a child, he can't possibly, he felt me. Through the wards. Through the walls. Through everything." The voice was barely a voice at all, more a hiss of displaced air, dry and cold as a tomb. I reached out, just a thread, just the faintest touch, and something in his mind saw me and shut the door. What does that mean, Master?" A long silence. The kind of silence that had teeth. "It means," whispered the thing on the back of Quirrell's skull, "that Lily Potter's brat is far more troublesome than I anticipated. No matter. The stone is what matters now. The boy can wait." Another silence. But not forever. The turban was rewound. The darkness settled. And somewhere in the vast, sleeping castle, Harry Potter dreamed of nothing, behind a wall that even the darkest wizard who ever lived could not breach. Chapter 3, The Troll and the Telepath. October came to Hogwarts like a slow exhale, the castle settling into autumn with the patient ease of something that had done it 1,000 times before. The grounds turned gold and copper, the lake went from blue to slate gray, and the forbidden forest darkened at its edges as if pulling its shadows tighter against the cold. Harry barely noticed. He was too busy learning to listen. 6 weeks in, and the hum had become as natural as breathing. He no longer had to concentrate to feel the emotional signatures around him, they were simply there, a constant layer of information laid over the world like a second skin. Walking into the great hall was like walking into a symphony, 200 minds broadcasting simultaneously, each one a unique instrument in an orchestra that only Harry could hear. He'd learned to manage the volume, to push the noise to the periphery of his awareness and let it sit there, turning it up only when he needed it. And he was starting to need it more and more. The thing about reading emotions, even passively, even without words or images, was that it made lying almost impossible to miss. A lie created a specific dissonance, like a wrong note in a familiar melody. The surface word said one thing, the emotional signature underneath said another. Most people's lies were small and harmless, Ron claiming he'd finished his charms essay when his anxiety said otherwise, Neville insisting he was fine when his misery was broadcasting at full power, Hermione saying she didn't care about her marks when her entire nervous system was wired to a constant achievement monitor. But some lies were bigger. And some liars were better. Harry had been watching Quirrell for weeks now, cataloging the dissonance between what the man presented and what he actually was. In class, Quirrell stammered and flinched and dropped things and projected the signature of a man so timid he might faint if someone said, "Boo," too loudly. But it was performance. Harry could feel the effort behind it, the way you could feel the strain in an actor's voice when they were playing a character too far from their own nature. The stuttering, the cowardice, the nervous tics, all of it sat on top of Quirrell's actual emotional state like a costume worn over armor. And underneath the costume, the dark thing pulsed. Harry hadn't felt it reach for him again since that night in bed, when the image of the serpentine face had bled through his wall like a photograph developing in reverse. But he could feel it watching. In every defense class, during every meal, whenever Quirrell was in the same room, that cold secondary consciousness tracked Harry with the methodical patience of something that was used to waiting. It never pushed. It never probed. It just observed. Harry observed it right back. He'd also started noticing Snape more carefully. The potions master had settled into a pattern, open hostility in class, point deductions, sarcastic remarks, the systematic demolition of Harry's confidence in front of 30 witnesses, and careful avoidance everywhere else. Snape never looked him in the eyes anymore. In the corridors, in the Great Hall, whenever their paths crossed outside the dungeon classroom, Snape's gaze slid past Harry like oil over water. The man was afraid of what would happen if their eyes met again. But Snape was also watching Quirrell. Harry had caught it 3 times now, quick, sharp glances across the staff table, loaded with suspicion and something that might have been recognition. Snape knew something was wrong with the defense professor. Maybe not what Harry knew, maybe not the double signal or the dark consciousness, but something. And whatever he knew, it was making him angry. October 31st fell on a Thursday, and the castle was buzzing with Halloween energy from the moment Harry opened his eyes. Hagrid's pumpkins, the size of garden sheds, each one, had been carved and enchanted and were currently floating in the Great Hall, casting orange light across a ceiling that showed a sky heavy with cloud and the occasional flash of distant lightning. Live bats swooped between the candles. The suits of armor had been enchanted to groan and rattle their visors at passing students. Even the ghosts were putting on a show, nearly headless Nick demonstrating his signature party trick to increasingly queasy first years. But Harry couldn't enjoy any of it. Something was wrong with the hum. It had started that morning, a tension in the emotional atmosphere of the castle, subtle but persistent, like the change in air pressure before a storm. Not from the students, whose excitement was genuine and uncomplicated. Not from most of the staff, who were caught up in the holiday preparations. It was coming from 2 sources, Quirrell, whose dark signal had been running hotter all week, pulsing with a barely contained anticipation that set Harry's teeth on edge, and Snape, whose usual tightly controlled bitterness had sharpened into something more active. More alert. Both of them were expecting something. And whatever it was happening tonight. Harry sat through charms that morning in a state of distracted vigilance. They were practicing the levitation charm, Wingardium Leviosa, and Ron was butchering the pronunciation so badly that Hermione finally snapped and corrected him, earning herself a glare that could have curdled milk. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa, she said, in the clipped, precise tone of someone who genuinely didn't understand why everyone else found things so difficult. Ron's emotional signature flared, embarrassment, irritation, a sharp spike of the insecurity that lived permanently beneath his bravado. Harry felt it land and knew, with the certainty of someone who'd spent years reading People to Survive, that Ron was about to say something he'd regret. He was right. It's no wonder no one can stand her, Ron muttered to Seamus as they left class. She's a nightmare, honestly. Harry felt Hermione before he saw her, a sudden, wrenching pulse of hurt that cut through the ambient noise like a scream. She pushed past them, her head down, her bushy hair hiding her face, but not before Harry caught the glint of tears on her cheek. I think she heard you, Harry said quietly. Ron had the grace to look uncomfortable, but he shrugged it off with the defensive ease of an 11-year-old boy who hadn't yet learned that words could wound deeper than hexes. So. She must have noticed she's got no friends. Harry said nothing. He watched Hermione's retreating back and felt the trail of her anguish linger in the air like perfume. He thought about going after her. He thought about the years he'd spent at the Dursleys, surrounded by people who thought he was worthless, and how a single kind word in those moments would have meant more than all the magic in the world. But the bell rang, and the day carried him forward, and by the time afternoon classes ended and the Halloween feast began, Hermione still hadn't appeared. Has anyone seen Hermione Granger? Harry asked Parvati Patil as they filed into the Great Hall. Parvati's emotional signature pulsed with the particular mix of concern and gossip that seemed to be her default setting. She's been in the girls' bathroom on the first floor all afternoon. Lavender says she's been crying. Harry looked at Ron. Ron looked at his shoes. We should go get her, Harry said. She doesn't want to talk to me, mate. No. Probably not. But she shouldn't be alone on Halloween. Ron opened his mouth to argue, but whatever he saw in Harry's expression made him close it again. They took their seats at the Gryffindor table, and Harry resolved to go find Hermione after the main course. She shouldn't miss the feast entirely. And he knew, from personal experience, that there was nothing worse than crying alone in a room while everyone else celebrated. The feast was spectacular. Mountains of food, enchanted decorations, a troupe of dancing skeletons that performed a surprisingly coordinated waltz between the house tables. Harry ate without tasting, his attention split between the food in front of him and the staff table at the far end of the hall. Quirrell was there, picking at his plate, his stutter apparently extending to his ability to hold a fork steady. But underneath the performance, the dark signal was singing. That was the only word for it, a low, vibrating hum of anticipation, coiled tight and ready to spring, like a snake about to strike. Whatever was supposed to happen tonight, it was close. Quirrell knew it. The thing inside Quirrell knew it. And Harry, sitting 50 feet away with a plate of treacle tart he couldn't eat, knew it too. Snape was watching Quirrell. His face was a mask of practiced indifference, but his emotional signature was a coiled spring, vigilant, suspicious, ready. He barely touched his food. His black eyes tracked Quirrell's movements with the focused attention of a hawk watching a mouse. Something was about to happen. Harry could feel it building in the hum like static before lightning. He pushed back his chair, ready to go find Hermione, ready to get her out of that bathroom and back to the safety of the crowd, when the doors of the Great Hall burst open and Quirrell sprinted in. The man's turban was askew, his face was the color of old porridge, and he was running with the exaggerated, stumbling gait of someone performing terror rather than feeling it. He reached the staff table, grabbed the edge with both hands, and gasped out, "Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know," and then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed on the floor in a dead faint. The hall exploded into screams. Students leapt to their feet, chairs toppled, 100 voices shrieked at once. Dumbledore rose and fired purple sparks from his wand, shouting for silence and order, and within seconds the prefects were herding students toward their common rooms in long, panicked lines. Harry didn't move. He was staring at Quirrell's crumpled form on the floor, and every sense he possessed, physical and magical, natural and impossible, was screaming the same thing. He's lying. There was no fear in Quirrell. None. Not a whisper, not a flicker. The feint was fake. Harry could feel Quirrell's consciousness burning bright and alert beneath the performance, the dark signal pulsing with satisfaction rather than terror. The man who had just warned the entire school about a troll in the dungeons was not afraid of the troll. He had expected the troll. He might have brought the troll. And Hermione was alone in a bathroom on the first floor, and the entire school was being shepherded in the wrong direction, and nobody else in this hall could feel what Harry could feel. He grabbed Ron's arm. Hermione. Ron's face went white. What? She doesn't know about the troll. She's in the first-floor bathroom. We have to get her. But the prefect said to go back to the common room, Ron. Harry's grip tightened. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Whatever Ron saw in his face, that quiet, certain intensity that had no business living behind an 11-year-old's eyes, it was enough. All right, Ron said. All right, let's go. They slipped away from the Gryffindor line as it filed through the entrance hall, ducking behind a pillar and then darting down a side corridor. Harry moved fast, not quite running, navigating the castle with an instinct that went beyond memorized routes. He could feel the troll, not its emotions, exactly, because the thing barely had a mind worth the name, but its presence, a dull, heavy blankness moving through the corridors below them, like a hole in the hum where a thinking creature should be. It wasn't in the dungeons. Harry stopped dead in the middle of a corridor. Ron nearly crashed into him. What? It's not down there. It's up here. First floor. Harry's mouth went dry. It's near the bathroom. How do you? I can smell it. The lie came easily. And it wasn't entirely untrue. A moment later, a wave of stench rolled down the corridor toward them, the unmistakable reek of old socks and public toilets and something fouler underneath. Ron gagged. Harry was already running. They rounded a corner and saw it. The troll was 12 feet tall and the approximate color and texture of a granite boulder that had been left out in the rain for a century. It was carrying a wooden club the size of a telephone pole, and it was standing directly outside the girls' bathroom, its tiny, stupid eyes fixed on the door with the dull fascination of something that had heard a noise and was trying to decide whether to investigate or simply smash everything in the vicinity. As they watched, it chose smash. The club swung in a massive arc and crashed through the bathroom door, sending splinters of wood and chunks of stone exploding inward. From inside, a scream, high, terrified, and unmistakably Hermione. Oh no, Ron whispered. Harry was already moving. He didn't think about it. Thinking would have slowed him down, and some part of him, the part that lived behind the wall, the part that felt and sensed and knew, had already calculated the trajectory and timing of the troll's movements with a precision that his conscious mind couldn't have matched. He ran through the shattered doorway, ducking under a chunk of falling masonry that missed his head by an inch, and found himself in a bathroom that was rapidly being demolished. The troll had entered. It was swinging its club with the mindless enthusiasm of a toddler with a hammer, obliterating sinks and stalls and sending geysers of water spraying from shattered pipes. Hermione was pressed against the far wall, her face white, her mouth open in a scream that had gone silent with terror. The troll's next swing would bring the club directly across the space where she was standing. Harry felt the swing before it started. Not the sound, not the movement, the intention, the dull, brutish impulse that preceded action in even the most primitive minds. The troll was going to swing right, aiming low, in approximately 2 seconds. Hermione, down. Harry shouted, and she dropped, not because she understood what was happening but because the command in his voice left no room for hesitation. The club whistled over her head and smashed into the wall, showering her with plaster dust and fragments of tile. Ron appeared in the doorway, his wand out, his face a mask of terrified determination. Oi! P-brain! He threw a piece of broken pipe at the troll's head. It bounced off the creature's skull with a dull clonk and achieved nothing except redirecting its attention. The troll turned, its tiny eyes finding Ron, and raised its club. Harry didn't have a plan. What he had was something better, a mind that could read the troll's intentions before they became actions, reflexes that responded to that information faster than thought, and the absolute, iron certainty that he was not going to let this thing hurt his friends. He jumped on the troll's back. It was, objectively, the stupidest thing he'd ever done. But the troll's mind, such as it was, had been focused entirely on Ron, and Harry's sudden weight on its shoulders caused a moment of blank, befuddled confusion that he could feel like a gap in a heartbeat. In that gap, moving on instinct, Harry shoved his wand directly up the troll's left nostril. The troll bellowed. Its arms windmilled. The club flew from its grip, arcing through the air in a trajectory that Harry's enhanced awareness tracked with crystalline clarity. Ron! The club! Levitate it! Now! Ron raised his wand. His hand was shaking so badly the wand tip was drawing circles in the air. But the words came out right, Wingardium Leviosa. And Hermione's pronunciation correction saved all three of their lives, because the club froze in midair, hung for a single suspended second, and then dropped directly onto the troll's head with a sound like a coconut hitting concrete. The troll swayed. Its eyes crossed. And then it fell, straight forward, like a tree cut at the base, and Harry leapt clear just in time to avoid being crushed beneath 12 feet of unconscious mountain troll. The bathroom was destroyed. Water gushed from broken pipes. Plaster dust hung in the air like fog. Harry lay on his back in a puddle of freezing water, breathing hard, his wand covered in troll bogies, and stared at the ceiling. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his eardrums. Is it dead? Hermione's voice was very small. No, Harry said, sitting up and wiping his wand on his robes with a grimace. Just knocked out. Ron was standing in the doorway, his wand still raised, looking as though he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. His emotional signature was a chaotic swirl of adrenaline, triumph, and the particular flavor of shocked disbelief that came from discovering you were braver than you thought. Did I just? Ron gestured weakly at the troll. You did. Nice pronunciation, by the way. The corner of Ron's mouth twitched. He looked at Hermione. She looked at him. And something shifted between them, something Harry could feel as clearly as he felt the water soaking through his robes. The hurt from earlier, the cruel words, the afternoon of crying, none of it disappeared, but it was suddenly overlaid with something stronger. Shared danger. Shared survival. The raw, unglamorous bond that formed when you faced a troll together and came out the other side. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. A moment later, McGonagall burst through the shattered doorway, followed by Snape and Quirrell. McGonagall took one look at the unconscious troll, the demolished bathroom, and the three soaking wet first-years standing in the wreckage, and her face cycled through an impressive range of expressions, horror, fury, bewilderment, and something that might have been reluctant admiration, all in the space of about 3 seconds. What on earth, explain yourselves, all three of you. Harry opened his mouth, but Hermione got there first. It was my fault, Professor McGonagall. Ron's jaw dropped. Harry felt the lie land, but it wasn't entirely a lie. It was a choice. Hermione was choosing to rewrite the story, to take the blame, to protect the two boys who had come to save her. Her emotional signature pulsed with something fierce and deliberate, loyalty. I went looking for the troll because I'd read about them and thought I could handle it, Hermione continued, her voice steady despite her still damp cheeks. If Harry and Ron hadn't found me, I'd probably be dead. McGonagall stared at Hermione with an expression that suggested she didn't believe a word of this but recognized the underlying message. Her lips thinned. Miss Granger, this was extremely foolish. 5 points from Gryffindor for your serious lack of judgment. She turned to Harry and Ron. As for you two, not many first-year students could take on a full-grown mountain troll and live. 5 points will be awarded to each of you. For sheer dumb luck. She swept out, ushering them ahead of her. But as Harry passed through the doorway, two things happened simultaneously. Snape looked at him. And Harry looked at Snape. Their eyes met for the first time since the potions classroom, and in the half-second of contact, Harry felt Snape's mind brush against his wall, not a deliberate probe this time, more an involuntary reflex, like flinching when someone moved too fast near your face. The contact was brief, glancing, barely there. But Harry saw something. Not through Snape's intent, through the contact itself, a flash of information that leaked across the connection like sparks jumping between wires. Snape's right leg, beneath his robes, was bleeding. A wound, deep, ragged, fresh. Not from the troll. From something with teeth. Something that guarded, the connection severed. Snape looked away, his jaw tight, and limped, Harry noticed now, after McGonagall. Harry filed the information away and kept walking. And Quirrell, bringing up the rear, wasn't stuttering anymore. His face was composed, his hands were steady, and in the 2 seconds that Harry's back was turned, the dark signal behind the turban pulsed once with something that felt, unmistakably, like frustration. Whatever Quirrell had been trying to do tonight, whatever the troll had been a diversion for, it hadn't gone according to plan. The common room was chaos when they got back. The Weasley twins had somehow procured a crate of butterbeers and were distributing them with the air of wartime profiteers. Neville was huddled in a corner looking traumatized. Dean Thomas was giving a wildly inaccurate account of troll anatomy to anyone who would listen. Harry, Ron, and Hermione found 3 chairs by the fire and sat in the particular silence of people who had shared something too large for easy conversation. The fire crackled. The common room buzzed around them. Ron was the first to speak. "You saved my life," he said to Hermione. "With McGonagall. You didn't have to do that." Hermione's cheeks went pink. "You saved mine first. With the club." Harry did the hard part. "Jumping on the bloody thing like a nutter, language, Ron. See, this is what I mean, you can't just," but he was grinning, and she was trying not to smile, and Harry sat between them and felt the warmth of something new and fragile forming in the space where 3 separate loneliness had been. Friendship. Real friendship, not the cautious, conditional kind he'd learned at the Dursleys, where affection was always transactional and could be revoked without notice. This was different. This was 3 people who had chosen each other in the space between a troll's club and the floor, and that choice, once made, was not easily unmade. He didn't tell them about Quirrell. He didn't tell them about the false signal, the calculated performance, the satisfaction pulsing beneath the feint. He didn't tell them about Snape's leg, or the flash of information that had passed between them when their eyes met, or the growing certainty crystallizing in his mind that tonight had been orchestrated, that the troll had been a diversion, a distraction, a way to empty the castle and send the teachers scrambling so that someone could go somewhere they weren't supposed to be. He kept all of that behind the wall, where it was safe. "Harry?" Hermione's voice was soft. "Are you all right? You've gone quiet." "I'm fine," he said. "Just thinking." "About what?" He looked at the fire. The flames danced and snapped, casting orange light across the common room. Behind his eyes, the wall stood silent and vast, holding his secrets the way the castle held its students, firmly, completely, with a patience that bordered on the eternal. "About how glad I am you're both okay," he said. It was true. It was also approximately 10% of what he was actually thinking. But it was the 10% they needed to hear, and the rest could wait. 2 days after Halloween, Snape found him. It was late, past curfew, technically, though Harry had a reasonable excuse. He'd been in the library until closing, researching something Hermione had mentioned about the properties of dragon blood, and the route back to Gryffindor Tower took him through a stretch of second-floor corridor that was usually deserted at this hour. Usually. Not tonight. Snape materialized from a shadowed alcove like he'd been waiting there, which, Harry realized with a cold jolt, he probably had. The potions master's face was half lit by a wall torch, all sharp angles and deep shadows, and his black eyes fixed on Harry with an intensity that would have been intimidating if Harry hadn't already survived a troll and an evening of Dumbledore's subtle mind games. Potter. Out of bed after hours. How delightfully predictable. I was in the library, sir. I'm on my way back to the tower. Are you? Snape took a step closer. His limp was less pronounced than it had been 2 days ago, but still visible. Tell me, Potter, do you often wander the corridors alone at night? Following in your father's footsteps, no doubt. He had the same disregard for rules. Harry said nothing. He could feel Snape's emotional signature pressing against his awareness, the familiar braid of bitterness and fascination, but tonight there was something else. Desperation. The man was wound so tight he was practically vibrating. Whatever had happened on Halloween night, whatever had bitten his leg, whatever he'd been trying to stop or protect, it had shaken him. And now he was here, in a dark corridor, confronting the one puzzle he couldn't solve, because the puzzle was easier to face than whatever else was keeping him up at night. I was just going back, sir, Harry said carefully. Look at me, Potter. The words were quiet, almost gentle, which made them more dangerous than if they'd been shouted. Harry looked up. Their eyes met. The probe was immediate, forceful, and nothing like Dumbledore's gossamer touch. This was Snape at full power, a battering ram of focused will, driven by weeks of sleepless obsession and a desperate need to understand. Harry felt the pressure slam against his wall like a wave hitting a cliff face. The wall held. Obviously. It always held. But this time, Snape didn't stop. He pushed harder, throwing more force behind the intrusion than he had in the potions classroom, more than was safe, more than was professional, more than was sane. Harry could feel the man's magic straining against his shields, could feel the sharp edges of Snape's consciousness scraping against the smooth, featureless surface of the wall, searching for a seam, a crack, a weakness, anything. There was nothing. And the wall pushed back. Not gently. Not with the measured, clinical precision of the access denied message. This time, the defense was proportional to the attack, a wall of force that traveled back along the connection between their locked gazes and hit Snape like a physical blow. The man staggered. His hand went to his temple. Blood, bright, arterial red, began to drip from his left nostril. Harry blinked. The pressure vanished. The corridor was silent except for the guttering of the wall torch and Snape's harsh, uneven breathing. Professor? Harry's voice was uncertain. Snape was gripping the wall with one hand, his other pressed against his bleeding nose, and his face had gone the color of old parchment. Are you all right? Snape stared at him. The hand on the wall was shaking. Blood ran over his lip and dripped from his chin, spattering the stone floor with tiny crimson stars. In that moment, stripped of his sneer and his composure and the armor of sarcasm he wore like a second skin, Severus Snape looked like what he was, a man who had just thrown himself against an immovable object and lost. What? Snape's voice was raw. What are you? Harry didn't know how to answer that. He didn't know what he was. He only knew what he felt, the wall settling back into its patient, silent vigilance, unperturbed by Snape's assault, as unmoved as a mountain after a gust of wind. Something happened in Snape's face. It was small and fast and deeply human, a crack in the mask, a flash of something that might have been shame. Here he was, a grown man, a professor, a former Death Eater who had survived the Dark Lord's service and Dumbledore's demands and 20 years of his own self-loathing, and he had just tried to force his way into a child's mind and gotten a nosebleed for his trouble. A child who was now asking, with genuine concern, if he needed medical attention. Lily's child. Lily's eyes, looking at him with worry instead of accusation. Snape pulled a handkerchief from his robes and pressed it to his nose. His hand was still shaking. Go back to your tower, Potter. Sir, now. Harry went. But he walked slowly, and he could feel Snape watching him all the way down the corridor, that dark, tortured attention following him like a shadow. At the corner, he paused and looked back. Snape was still standing where he'd left him, leaning against the wall, the handkerchief dark with blood, his eyes fixed on Harry with an expression that was no longer contempt or fascination or even fear. It was recognition. The terrible, grudging recognition of a man who has just realized that the thing he's been trying to break is not what he thought it was, and that breaking it was never the right approach to begin with. Harry turned the corner and was gone. He didn't go straight back to Gryffindor Tower. Instead, he took a detour through the third-floor corridor, the one Dumbledore had warned them about, the one they'd stumbled into weeks ago and found a three-headed dog standing on a trapdoor. Harry didn't approach the door. He just stood at the end of the corridor, in the dark, and listened. The dog was there. He could feel its minds, 3 of them, one for each head, each one a knot of aggressive, territorial fury that made the troll seem like a puppy. But beneath the dog, through the trapdoor, through whatever enchantments lay below, Harry could feel something else. Something small and bright and impossibly old, pulsing with a magic so concentrated it was almost audible. Whatever it was, Quirrell wanted it. The troll on Halloween had been a diversion so Quirrell could get past the dog. Snape had tried to stop him, that was the source of the leg wound. 2 professors, playing a game of cat and mouse around a guarded object hidden beneath the school, and Harry was standing in the middle of it, the boy with the impenetrable mind, and no one was telling him anything. He could find out. The realization settled over him quietly, without fanfare. He could feel the enchantments below, could sense their architecture the same way he sensed people's emotions, as shapes and textures in the magical hum. He could feel the dogs' minds and knew, intuitively, that creatures driven by instinct were easier to read than humans. He could map the defenses without going near them. He could solve this puzzle the way he'd been solving puzzles all his life, by watching, listening, and understanding things that others couldn't see. But not tonight. Tonight, he went back to Gryffindor Tower, climbed into bed, and lay in the dark listening to his friends sleep. Ron's golden dreams. Neville's anxious ones. Seamus's small explosions. And from far away, muffled by stone and enchantment and the vast, patient architecture of his own mind, the faint pulse of that bright thing beneath the trapdoor, waiting for someone to come and claim it. Harry pressed his hand to his scar. It was quiet tonight. The dark thing behind Quirrell's turban was dormant, resting, perhaps, after the frustration of its failed Halloween gambit. But it would try again. Harry was certain of that. Whatever the bright thing was, the dark thing wanted it badly enough to take risks, to expose itself, to send a mountain troll lumbering through a school full of children. And Harry was the only person in this castle who could feel both of them, the bright thing and the dark thing, and understand that they were locked in a gravity, pulling toward each other like a collision waiting to happen. He closed his eyes. The wall hummed, warm and steady and eternal. Behind it, the boy who heard thoughts and felt lies and had jumped on a troll's back without thinking tucked his knees to his chest and breathed. He was 11 years old. He was in over his head. And he was, against all odds, not alone anymore, because somewhere in this tower, a girl who had lied to a professor to protect him and a boy who had levitated a club to save him were both sleeping soundly, trusting the castle and the night and the strange, quiet boy with the scar to keep the darkness at bay. Harry intended to be worthy of that trust. Even if it meant walking into the dark alone to do it. Chapter 4, The Mirror and the Memory. December arrived like a held breath finally released, and Hogwarts exhaled winter across every stone and corridor. Snow piled against the windows in drifts that glowed blue in the moonlight. The lake froze solid enough for the giant squid to be seen moving beneath the ice like a slow, dark dream. Icicles hung from the towers like crystal teeth, and the suits of armor had taken to humming carols at odd hours, their hollow metal voices echoing through empty hallways at 3 in the morning until Filch threatened to melt them all down for doorstops. Harry barely noticed the cold. Something inside his wall generated its own warmth, a steady, ambient heat that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with whatever ancient magic was wrapped around his mind. He could stand in the courtyard while other students shivered in their cloaks and feel nothing worse than a pleasant coolness, like standing near an open window in spring. Ron had commented on it twice. Hermione had given him a look that suggested she was filing it away for future investigation. He was getting used to those looks. Hermione noticed everything, catalogued everything, and would eventually connect dots that Harry wasn't sure he wanted connected. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, the problem was Christmas. The castle was emptying. Students poured out like sand from an hourglass, heading home for the holidays in chattering, trunk-laden groups. Ron had offered to take Harry to the burrow. "Mom says you're welcome, she's already knitting you a jumper, there's no stopping her once she starts," but Harry had declined. He told Ron he wanted to explore the castle while it was quiet. This was true, but it was only part of the truth. The fuller truth was that Harry needed time alone with the hum. Over the past 2 months, his passive perception had grown steadily stronger, and with it, a creeping awareness that he was approaching some kind of threshold. The emotional signatures he picked up were getting sharper, more detailed, more specific. Where once he'd felt only broad strokes, happy, sad, angry, afraid, he was now catching nuances. He could distinguish between Ron's homesickness, warm, aching, tinged with the golden frequency of a large, loving family, and Neville's homesickness, gray, anxious, laced with the particular loneliness of a boy raised by a grandmother who loved him fiercely but didn't quite know how to show it. He could feel the difference between Hermione's academic stress, bright, sharp, electrically charged, and Malfoy's social stress, cold, brittle, riddled with hairline fractures of self-doubt. And twice now, just twice, both times when he'd been very tired and very focused, he'd caught actual words. Not full sentences. Not clear, distinct thoughts. Just fragments, floating up from someone's mind like bubbles rising in water. A snatch of internal monologue, a half-formed question, a name repeated with emotional emphasis. The first time it happened, he'd been sitting next to Neville in herbology, and he'd felt heard, in that strange synesthetic way that blurred the line between perception and imagination, a voice that was unmistakably Neville's whispering Gran would be so disappointed. The second time was worse. He'd been walking past Quirrell in a corridor, and from behind the turban, from that dark secondary consciousness that coiled inside the professor like a parasite, he'd caught a single word, spoken in a voice like dry leaves scraping stone, soon. Harry had walked faster and hadn't looked back. So he needed the holidays. He needed the castle quiet, the noise reduced to a manageable murmur, so he could sit with this growing power and try to understand it without the constant overwhelming input of 200 broadcasting minds. He needed to map his own interior landscape, to explore the wall not from the outside, as Snape and Dumbledore had done, but from within. Christmas morning was a revelation. He'd never received presents before. Not once, not in 11 years. The pile at the foot of his bed was small by any standard, a wooden flute from Hagrid, a box of chocolate frogs from Hermione, a lumpy package from Ron's mum that turned out to be a hand-knitted jumper in emerald green, but Harry sat cross-legged on his bed and opened each one with the slow, careful attention of someone experiencing a miracle. The jumper smelled like cinnamon and old wool and someone else's home, and when he pulled it over his head, the warmth that spread through his chest had nothing to do with the knitting. The last package was different. It was wrapped in silvery cloth that shimmered when he touched it, lighter than air, cool against his fingers. There was a note, written in narrow, looping script he didn't recognize. "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." No signature. Harry unfolded the cloth and gasped. It wasn't cloth at all, it was a cloak, and when he swung it around his shoulders, his body vanished. He stood in front of the dormitory mirror, a floating head above a cascade of shimmering nothing, and stared at himself with wide green eyes. An invisibility cloak. Someone had given him an invisibility cloak. His father's invisibility cloak. The possibilities crashed over him like a wave. With this, he could go anywhere in the castle. See anything. Hear anything. He could explore the third-floor corridor, investigate Quirrell, find out what was hidden beneath that trapdoor. He could be invisible in a castle full of people who were trying to read his mind, and the thought sent a thrill through him that was part excitement, part something darker and more strategic. He put the cloak on that night and walked out of Gryffindor Tower into a castle transformed by moonlight and silence. The corridors were silver and black, the shadows deep and absolute, the only sound the soft scuff of his own invisible feet on ancient stone. The hum was almost silent, just a handful of minds left in the castle, most of them sleeping. Dumbledore was somewhere far above, a distant, steady pulse of wakefulness that never seemed to dim. Snape was in the dungeons, his signature a dark, restless knot of insomnia and old grief. Quirrell, Harry focused carefully, was in his quarters on the third floor, the double signal muted but present, the dark consciousness drowsing. Harry let his instincts guide him. He had no destination in mind, no plan, just the need to move through the sleeping castle and feel it around him, to be invisible and free and himself in a way that was only possible when no one was watching. His feet carried him to the fourth floor, down a corridor he'd never seen before, past a series of empty classrooms with dust-covered desks and cobwebbed chandeliers. The castle was full of forgotten rooms like this, spaces that had once served a purpose and were now abandoned, left to accumulate decades of silence. Harry liked them. They felt like his cupboard at the Dursleys, minus the misery, small, enclosed, forgotten places where a boy could disappear. The door at the end of the corridor was different from the others. It was ajar, and from beyond it, Harry could feel something. Not a mind, not a human or animal presence. Something else. A pull, gentle but insistent, like a hand tugging at the hem of his cloak. A magical object of considerable power, radiating a frequency that resonated with something deep inside Harry's wall. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty except for a mirror. It stood in the center of the floor, enormous and ornate, its golden frame carved with symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. The glass was dark, not reflective, not yet, and across the top of the frame, words were inscribed in a script that Harry had to read backward before they made sense. Eris stra eru oit ube kafru oit anwosi. I show not your face but your heart's desire. Harry stood before the mirror and looked into its surface, and the glass cleared like fog burning off a lake, and he saw them. His parents. His mother was beautiful. That was the first thing he registered, not the red hair or the green eyes that he'd been told were just like his, but the aliveness of her. She was smiling at him with a warmth so fierce and so complete that it reached through the glass and wrapped around his heart like a fist. Beside her, his father, messy dark hair, glasses, a grin that was half mischief and half tenderness, had one hand on Lily's shoulder and the other raised in a wave, as though Harry had just walked into the room and they were greeting him after a long absence. Behind them, more faces. Grandparents, he supposed. Family he'd never known. A whole constellation of people who shared his blood and his features and his smile, all of them looking at him with the same expression, love, pride, welcome. You belong to us. You've always belonged to us. Harry's throat closed. His eyes burned. He stood motionless before the mirror, invisible cloak pooling around his feet, and for the first time since he could remember, he cried. Not the angry, stifled tears of a boy locked in a cupboard. These were deeper, pulled from somewhere beneath the wall, from a reservoir of grief he hadn't known he was carrying. He cried for the parents he'd never met, for the family that should have been his, for 10 years of birthdays spent alone and Christmas mornings with nothing and a life so empty of love that a hand-knitted jumper from a stranger could make him feel like the richest boy in the world. The mirror shimmered. His parents reached for him. His mother's mouth moved, forming words he couldn't hear, but he could feel them, a vibration in the mirror's magic that his wall translated into pure emotion. We're so proud of you. We love you. We've always loved you. And then the wall did something it had never done before. It filtered. Harry felt the shift, a subtle recalibration inside his own mind, like a lens adjusting its focus. The mirror's magic was strong, possibly the strongest enchantment Harry had ever encountered, and it was designed to do one thing: gripped the viewer's desire so completely that they would waste away before the glass, trapped in a beautiful lie, starving for something they could never have. The wall wouldn't allow it. Harry felt the enchantment's hooks, delicate, invisible, buried in the emotion like thorns in silk, and he felt his mind's defenses identify them, isolate them, and gently dissolve them. The image in the mirror didn't change. His parents were still there, still smiling, still reaching for him. But the compulsion was gone. The desperate, addictive need to stay, to stare, to drown in the reflection, the mirror's real weapon, the thing that had destroyed men far older and wiser than Harry, evaporated like morning frost. He could see his heart's desire. He just couldn't be enslaved by it. Harry wiped his eyes, took a shuddering breath, and looked at his parents with clear vision. They were still smiling. His mother's hand was pressed against the glass from her side, and Harry raised his own hand and placed it against hers. The glass was cold. He could feel the mirror's enchantment lapping at his wall like waves against a seawall, each one testing, probing, trying to find a way back to that grip, and each one dissolving on contact. "I wish I'd known you," he whispered. The image shimmered. His mother's green eyes, his eyes, glistened with tears that existed only in reflection. Harry lowered his hand, stepped back, and pulled the invisibility cloak over his head. He could come back tomorrow night. He could look at them again. The mirror couldn't trap him, couldn't consume him, his wall made sure of that. But he could still visit. He could still stand before the glass and feel, for a few minutes, what it might have been like to have a family. He turned to leave and stopped. Someone was watching him. Not from inside the room, from the corridor beyond. A mind, half hidden behind its own considerable shields, radiating the particular quality of attention that Harry had learned to associate with one person. Dumbledore. Harry stood very still. The invisibility cloak covered him completely, there was no way the headmaster could see him. But Dumbledore wasn't looking with his eyes. Harry could feel the old man's awareness sweeping the room like a searchlight, gentle and thorough, and he could feel the moment it passed over him and paused. Dumbledore couldn't read his thoughts. But he could apparently detect his presence, or rather, detect the wall, which must have stood out in the magical landscape of the empty room like a bonfire in a dark field. Harry held his breath and felt Dumbledore's attention linger, assess, and then, with deliberate, almost theatrical care, withdraw. Footsteps in the corridor. Soft, unhurried. Moving away. Harry exhaled. He waited 5 minutes, then slipped out of the room and back to Gryffindor Tower, and lay awake until dawn thinking about parents he'd never known and a mirror that showed hearts and an old man who could find invisible boys in empty rooms. He went back the next night, and the night after that. Each time, his parents smiled and waved and mouthed words he could feel but not hear. Each time, the mirror's enchantment tried to hook him, and each time, the wall dissolved the hooks before they could set. He was studying the mirror as much as it was studying him, learning its magic the way he learned everything, through sensation, intuition, the passive absorption of information that his wall filtered and filed and stored for later use. On the third night, Dumbledore was waiting for him inside the room. The old man was sitting on a desk in the corner, his long legs crossed at the ankle, his half-moon cest at the ankle, his half-moon she looked as though he'd been there for hours, comfortable, patient, as much a part of the room as the mirror itself. "Good evening, Harry." Harry pulled off the CLSSED at the ankle, his half-moon S, Dumbledore Clest at the ankle, his half-moon set at the ankle, his half-moon S, I see you've discoved at the ankle, his half-moon Siffle and Terrible Upst at the ankle, his half-moon Siv's Best at the ankle, his half-moon S the ankle, his half-moon Steepest Dest at the ankle, his half-moon Sue eyes studied him. That said at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon S I ask what used at the ankle, his half-moon ST the ankle, his half-moon Cyanal signature pulsed with something old and heavy, said at the ankle, his half-moon's recognition. He knew said at the ankle, his half-moon SA grief so angst at the ankle, his half-moon S itched at the ankle, his half-moon SRE, load-bearing walls built from sorrow. The mirror said at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon sd I must ask just at the ankle, his half-moon st does nost at the ankle, his half-moon sle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon se. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Set at the ankle, his half-moon st the ankle, his half-moon ceiling, that is wast at the ankle, his half-moon stilomancy, best at the ankle, his half-moon sy magical attempt to manipulate his mental state. But Hesed at the ankle, his half-moon se careful dance of evasion endst at the ankle, his half-moon steinship with every adult in this cast list at the ankle, his half-moon half-moon s he was. Even if he couldn't expst at the ankle, his half-moon sd me, Harry said. Set at the ankle, his half-moon s it tried to make me want to stay forever. But summitst at the ankle, his half-moon st the ankle, his half-moon sensi set at the ankle, his half-moon s be caught by set at the ankle, his half-moon chest at the ankle, his half-moon s replaced by something raw and open, a look that Harry had never ceased at the ankle, his half-moon st the calculst at the ankle, his half-moon snot thssed at the ankle, his half-moon sn he tried to set at the ankle, his half-moon sd at the ankle, his half-moon soaking at Harry the way you might look at a sunset or immersed at the ankle, his half-moon sneeze set at the ankle, his half-moon sully understand. Remarkable, Dumbledore's at the ankle, his half-moon son has defeated wizards set at the ankle, his half-moon Sinclair, his half-moon as he known better, who understood exactly what's at the ankle, his half-moon sultan pull themselves ost at the ankle, his half-moon s dissolved it. I said at the ankle, his half-moon said. Yes, Dumbledore said softst at the ankle, his half-moon ss the said at the ankle, his half-moon sd, jawseed at the ankle, his half-moon stant fireworks, and rested a hand brist at the ankle, his half-moon sh was warm, grandfatherly, and underneath it, Harry felst at the ankle, his half-moon stemp to breach his wall. Set at the ankle, his half-moon san old man hust at the ankle, his half-moon s that might have been hope and might have been fear and was probst at the ankle, his half-moon spy Christmas. Happy Christmas, Professor. HSSED at the ankle, his half-moon sg for the mirror agst at the ankle, his half-moon same of his mother's face pressed at the ankle, his half-moon sayes shining with a love so fist at the ankle, his half-moon the glass melted said at the ankle, his half-moon souched his scar and said at the ankle, his half-moon shruff every layer of his wall said at the ankle, his half-moon assumed. Studst at the ankle, his half-moon sis half-moon sorry stood in the entrance hall and let it wash over him like ast at the ankle, his half-moon sr, reading the cursed at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon se, his half-moon s the bathroom mirror to said at the ankle, his half-moon snee wast at the ankle, his half-moon son who'd read approximist at the ankle, his half-moon snd Neville had a new plant from his uncle said at the ankle, his half-moon ss trunk. Everything was nost at the ankle, his half-moon s that Snape had request at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon shrist at the ankle, his half-moon s detention, Friday vest at the ankle, his half-moon st the ankle, his half-moon se December potion exam. There had been no December potion exam. HSSED at the ankle, his half-moon s perfectly adequate, not brilliant, because Snape marked him down at SED at the ankle, his half-moon sentient worthy. It whizzed at the ankle, his half-moon sklee, his half-moon sd they were both going to pretend others at the ankle, his half-moon say were playing. Friday came. Harry decessed at the ankle, his half-moon scked on Snape's office door, and enst at the ankle, his half-moon sting behind his desk with the look said at the ankle, his half-moon s himself for weeks at the ankle, his half-moon sorry said at the ankle, his half-moon sways, austere, cold, said at the ankle, his half-moon s noticed details he'd missed before. The jars on the shelves said at the ankle, his half-moon snt but by some secondary system he couldn't identify at the ankle, his half-moon s, his half-moon stead to impose order on chaos. The desk was bare except for a single lamp, a pot offst at the ankle, his half-moon ss that Snape clearly hadn't beast at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon sh to collect a fine layer of dust. Set at the ankle, his half-moon set at the ankle, his half-moon s drifted towards at the ankle, his half-moon s inst at the ankle, his half-moon su wast at the ankle, his half-moon sunderstand something. Snape's voice was meest at the ankle, his half-moon st, Harry could feel thest at the ankle, his half-moons from a furnist at the ankle, his half-moon so's to the surface. Whist at the ankle, his half-moon sy layers at the ankle, his half-moon se ankle, his half-moon s of his psyche dangerously exposed. And I suspect you do as well. Harry said at the ankle, his half-moon speened on the night before term s'd at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon sat came next wast at the ankle, his half-moon s inappropriately. Harst at the ankle, his half-moon sapology. Said at the ankle, his half-moon sos emotional signist at the ankle, his half-moon s self-loathing thatched at the ankle, his half-moon ser than facing a troll. Whist at the ankle, his half-moon s, is cast at the ankle, his half-moon s, the art of reading minds at the ankle, his half-moon sire since your firsts at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon shrode. You know. I seed at the ankle, his half-moon s don't nost at the ankle, his half-moon suti nost at the ankle, his half-moon s times. Dumbledost at the ankle, his half-moon s more. The silence said at the ankle, his half-moon s Harry could hear the lamp flame hissing. Snape's face had gone perfectly stist at the ankle, his half-moon saw his classroom persona, but the genuine said at the ankle, his half-moon s several fundamest at the ankle, his half-moon sneously. You can said at the ankle, his half-moon said. Then started again. You said at the ankle, his half-moon s. Without training. I can feel a lost at the ankle, his half-moon sorry weighed his options. The instinct said at the ankle, his half-moon shat said don't tell anst at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon sensed a different instinct, newer and said at the ankle, his half-moon said Snape, for all hissed at the ankle, his half-moon solely be someone who could help him underst at the ankle, his half-moon Occlumens. He said at the ankle, his half-moon spout watched at the ankle, his half-moon sbly, the only person in said at the ankle, his half-moon shrines of what harst at the ankle, his half-moon sologized. Badly, said at the ankle, his half-moon she ankle, his half-moon Spain. But he'd done it. I seed at the ankle, his half-moon sy said carefully. Not thoust at the ankle, his half-moon sgs. Said at the ankle, his half-moon s, whether there'll said at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon sklee, his half-moon sun the desk. His dark eyes were fixed on Harry said at the ankle, his half-moon stir hostile, no longer said at the ankle, his half-moon's the expression of a man hearing something he'd half-suspected confessed at the ankle, his half-moon se relieved or terrified. Enst at the ankle, his half-moon swall. You're asked at the ankle, his half-moon sare of it. I just didn't nost at the ankle, his half-moon so get through it and couldn't. Caused at the ankle, his half-moon snd esked at the ankle, his half-moon sug if it had contained any humor. I have bretchitst at the ankle, his half-moon srs, Potter. I have said at the ankle, his half-moon scads building a clemency shield specifixed at the ankle, his half-moon save been inst at the ankle, his half-moon sold kill me for the intrusion witst at the ankle, his half-moon sir mind stopped me like a child poost at the ankle, his half-moon sidn't do it on purpose est at the ankle, his half-moon terrifying. The said at the ankle, his half-moon s terrifying. From a man who had sest at the ankle, his half-moon sassed at the ankle, his half-moon srlds for a decade, will set at the ankle, his half-moon salive and living to tell asked at the ankle, his half-moon I said at the ankle, his half-moon sorry stiffened. Said at the ankle, his half-moon sd at the ankle, his half-moon cis nose, a reflexive gesture that suggests at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moons understand the nature of said at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon there are peoplest at the ankle, his half-moon show are coming, host at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon swir is a liabist at the ankle, his half-moon sre talking about Voldemort. Said at the ankle, his half-moon sp in the cest at the ankle, his half-moon s, not with said at the ankle, his half-moon sf rage and painst at the ankle, his half-moon s that he clearly wist at the ankle, his half-moon s Snape hissed at the ankle, his half-moon st cest at the ankle, his half-moon sower, you insufferable chest at the ankle, his half-moon cease more weight fanced at the ankle, his half-moon s breathed. Pressed at the ankle, his half-moon ssk. Yes. I am talking about at the ankle, his half-moon sa wizard who was, among other things, Perseid at the ankle, his half-moon s history. A wizard who could BSSED at the ankle, his half-moon soak eggs. A wizard set at the ankle, his half-moon SND discovers set at the ankle, his half-moon stop at nothing to iced at the ankle, his half-moon thought he was dead. HSSED at the ankle, his half-moon S set at the ankle, his half-moon S, he is diminished. Weakened. Set at the ankle, his half-moon Saturn, and when he does, set at the ankle, his half-moon S is you. Harry felt the truth of set at the ankle, his half-moon SS chest. Not because of Snape's whist at the ankle, his half-moon sitch had stirred, deep inst at the ankle, his half-moon SF Voldemort, RSSED at the ankle, his half-moon SS part recognition and part warning. Whataverst at the ankle, his half-moon S name. Noosed at the ankle, his half-moon sessifixed at the ankle, his half-moon S, try, then, Harry said quietly. But genst at the ankle, his half-moon SNG moment. Then he nodded, ost at the ankle, his half-moon S said at the ankle, his half-moon SS time was nothing like before. It was said at the ankle, his half-moon S the touch of a man who had least at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon surst at the ankle, his half-moon STS surst at the ankle, his half-moon SNST said at the ankle, his half-moon shing for cracks. Just. Feast at the ankle, his half-moon shured. His eyes were unfocused, his attensed at the ankle, his half-moon ser information his legilimency was retursed at the ankle, his half-moon S construxed at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon sreganixed at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon cis half-moon scone pale. What? I can't find the bost at the ankle, his half-moon SE, his half-moon S it sest at the ankle, his half-moon sndation. Your enst at the ankle, his half-moon sferitst at the ankle, his half-moon S memories, your personality, rests on this structure the way a house rests on bedrock. Harry absost at the ankle, his half-moon S it. Not set at the ankle, his half-moon SS half-moon swould be to go through it, which is, a dry, humorless lassade at the ankle, his half-moon SLLU what I think. Based on 20 years of experience and every scrap of realist at the ankle, his half-moon SME. Your mother died to save you. Not messed at the ankle, his half-moon SD between you and the killing curse and chose dest at the ankle, his half-moon cycle protection so powerful it destroyedst at the ankle, his half-moon shield your skinst at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon S voice had changed, lower, rougher, stripped of its usual set at the ankle, his half-moon SND the waltzt at the ankle, his half-moon SD at the ankle, his half-moon S him. I belst at the ankle, his half-moon so your mind. Lily's sacrifice set at the ankle, his half-moon S. It built a fortress around set at the ankle, his half-moon S powerful, that notched at the ankle, his half-moon S and, no compulsion, set at the ankle, his half-moon ST. Harry felt the set at the ankle, his half-moon cert beat. Set at the ankle, his half-moon SND the word seemed to set at the ankle, his half-moon SE him pain. Set at the ankle, his half-moon Sagic is built onst at the ankle, his half-moon sure of others will. Your mother's protects at the ankle, his half-moon S cannot be overcome by set at the ankle, his half-moon S on power. It operst at the ankle, his half-moon SS never understoodst at the ankle, his half-moon involuntarily, drifted toward the second drawer. Set at the ankle, his half-moon ST he didn't open it either. Set at the ankle, his half-moon SAS if tauxt at the ankle, his half-moon SGH to die for you, sest at the ankle, his half-moon SY a whisper. And that love is set at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon set at the ankle, his half-moon S his half-moon slinked hard, refusing to cry in FSSED at the ankle, his half-moon cis mossed at the ankle, his half-moon sermonant, made set at the ankle, his half-moon SLD in recorded history, pulsed asked at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon stat resisting tears was set at the ankle, his half-moon S, you knew her, Harry said. Said at the ankle, his half-moon. SD Snape went very still. The hand on the drawer handle tightest at the ankle, his half-moon S please, said at the ankle, his half-moon so Snape. HSSED at the ankle, his half-moon cis half-moon S not forced open but surrendered, voluntarist at the ankle, his half-moon simple and so raw that refused at the ankle, his half-moon SLTY even severe Snape cost at the ankle, his half-moon s closed his eyes. His immodest at the ankle, his half-moon shriness and hostility and said at the ankle, his half-moon s by something older and deeper and infinitely more paced at the ankle, his half-moon's memory, rising thrsssed at the ankle, his half-moon sght through dark water. She was the best person I ever kensed at the ankle, his half-moon sing impost at the ankle, his half-moon sonance, a said at the ankle, his half-moon s unshielded emotst at the ankle, his half-moon sray's own mind. Snapist at the ankle, his half-moon s, rest at the ankle, his half-moon shat bordered on the physical, and Harry's wast at the ankle, his half-moon ss half-moons recognized him. The said at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon shts. Outward. Said at the ankle, his half-moon se, and through it, something poured, not into Harry's mindst at the ankle, his half-moon snklee, his half-moon sealed back along the legilimency connection and hit Snape said at the ankle, his half-moon sd. His eyes flew open, wide and bssed at the ankle, his half-moon sate to the edges of his eye wrist at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon ses but with Snape's, reflist at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon cis half-moons between their connected minds like sound between two fast at the ankle, his half-moon children. A boy with lank said at the ankle, his half-moon sg behind a bush, watching a girl with red hair and said at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon sc. The boy's hssed at the ankle, his half-moon sting fast at the ankle, his half-moon shest at the ankle, his half-moon s magical and alive and she was the fssed at the ankle, his half-moons feel like the world contest at the ankle, his half-moon sly. Said at the ankle, his half-moon s and magnificent. The mest at the ankle, his half-moon sn, ost at the ankle, his half-moon sin summer, said at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon ss half-moon s was talking about Hogwarts, said at the ankle, his half-moons they were going together, everything was going to be wondest at the ankle, his half-moon sure smile was every thinst at the ankle, his half-moon ss half-moon stewer that wasn't his father's fists and his most at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon cis half-moon if we're not. Then we'll still be friends. Always. I promise. Anost at the ankle, his half-moon sg. The hat on the set at the ankle, his half-moon she like said at the ankle, his half-moon shat, momst at the ankle, his half-moon sle, his half-moon s him from across the hall, still smiling, sest at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon s back said at the ankle, his half-moon sas the beginst at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon sls. James posseed at the ankle, his half-moon snklee, his half-moon sa courtyard whist at the ankle, his half-moon s the boy calling her summitst at the ankle, his half-moon snd waxed at the ankle, his half-moon s in the set at the ankle, his half-moon sh, that he had just distressed at the ankle, his half-moon sfee. Standing outside said at the ankle, his half-moon sght, begging her to forgive him. Her faxed at the ankle, his half-moon sked and rssed at the ankle, his half-moon sayu for years. I seed at the ankle, his half-moon s your side. The said at the ankle, his half-moon signal as a coffin said at the ankle, his half-moon cinto seconds at the ankle, his half-moon s, Snape kneeling best at the ankle, his half-moon sate, beggingst at the ankle, his half-moon s dead. The sest at the ankle, his half-moon sa word, said at the ankle, his half-moon sial being torn out of a living bssed at the ankle, his half-moon shromist at the ankle, his half-moon st the ankle, his half-moon cis half-moon s always. The connection broke. Harry was gripping the set at the ankle, his half-moon sklees were white. His face was set at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon snee hand covist at the ankle, his half-moon sd and uneven, his emotional signatures at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon swound. The offst at the ankle, his half-moon s mouth to speak and founced at the ankle, his half-moon s to a man whose deepest, most guarded secret has just been blown open like a set at the ankle, his half-moon shin you've seen inst at the ankle, his half-moon s our own mother said at the ankle, his half-moon s like a butterfly in ambist at the ankle, his half-moon s said at the ankle, his half-moon ss face. His eyes were rest at the ankle, his half-moon s Harry had never seen on him before, not ast at the ankle, his half-moon said mask of indifference he wore like a unist at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon seen, truly seen, said at the ankle, his half-moon ss, by the last person he wist at the ankle, his half-moon shing, Snape said at the ankle, his half-moon s, his half-moon s. More than reason. More than she ever knew. A pause. Hissed at the ankle, his half-moon ss half-moon sverithst at the ankle, his half-moons that I, he stoppedst at the ankle, his half-moon so reassemble itself, the old defences strugst at the ankle, his half-moon smbling. Harry's wall had reflessed at the ankle, his half-moon s such fidelity, that the act of remembering had said at the ankle, his half-moon seds. She kenst at the ankle, his half-moon sng in Harry's voice, the surst at the ankle, his half-moon s had stossed at the ankle, his half-moons repeated. He couldn't expst at the ankle, his half-moon ss humming, not with informast at the ankle, his half-moon same resonance that had triggered the memory cast at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon stakably maternalst at the ankle, his half-moon sest at the ankle, his half-moon sto the presence of someone she had once lost at the ankle, his half-moon st the ankle, his half-moon stu. It opened for you. It wast at the ankle, his half-moon she'd givest at the ankle, his half-moon might have been a laugh. It might have been a sob. It's at the ankle, his half-moon suspest at the ankle, his half-moon she silent stretched. The lamp flame guttered and cessed at the ankle, his half-moon sa clock chimed 9. Set at the ankle, his half-moon sat last, and his voice was allst at the ankle, his half-moon s at the ankle, his half-moon s, his half-moon stuck point said at the ankle, his half-moon ston. I have a roll to mainst at the ankle, his half-moon ssnssed at the ankle, his half-moon sir stand, sir. But. Snape hesitast at the ankle, his half-moon savvy with everything he cost at the ankle, his half-moon s, withst at the ankle, his half-moon s you know where my office is. Harry nodded slowly. He stood, and Snape stood with him, and for a moment they faced each other across the desk, the greasy-haired boy who had loved a girl with green eyes and the green-eyed boy who carriedst at the ankle, his half-moon between them was no longer adversarial. It wasn't friendship, exactly, it was something Straussed at the ankle, his half-moon s was the understanding of two people who had seen each other's depths and chosen not to look away. Thank you, Professor, Harry said. For telling me about her. Snape nodded. His hand drifted to the second drawer, and this time he opened it. Harry caught a glimpse of something inside, a flash of said at the ankle, his half-moons closed it again and looked away. Get out, Potter. Before I come to my senses at the ankle, his half-moon shssed at the ankle, his half-moon ss said at the ankle, his half-moon s full of summer fist at the ankle, his half-moon st echoed thrssed at the ankle, his half-moon sat the ankle, his half-moon snd him, in his office, Severus Snape sat in the lamplights at the ankle, his half-moon sng girlst at the ankle, his half-moon sme said at the ankle, his half-moon saw what he'd lost. The tears commenced at the ankle, his half-moon she boy with lilies said at the ankle, his half-moon she said at the ankle, his half-moon spes said at the ankle, his half-moon sin the grief, the guilt, fest at the ankle, his half-moon silures, had crumbled like past at the ankle, his half-moon s. He allst at the ankle, his half-moon sat in the ruins and remembst at the ankle, his half-moon s at him with a face hesed at the ankle, his half-moon st stop waxed at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon sar, and said at the ankle, his half-moon ss sonst at the ankle, his half-moon s her impossible, universe-bending love rast at the ankle, his half-moon s skin, and sest at the ankle, his half-moon shim. Whatever it took. What's at the ankle, his half-moon sptssed at the ankle, his half-moon said at the ankle, his half-moon s the turban, whence at the ankle, his half-moon se, his half-moon s-moon sun s. Chapter 5, the mind behind the turban. Spring came late to Hogwarts that year, winter clinging to the castle like a guest who refused to leave. The snow retreated grudgingly from the grounds through March and into April, leaving behind mud and grey sky and the particular Scottish dampness that seeped into stone and bone alike. But inside the castle, something else was thawing, a mystery that had been frozen in place since Halloween, and which was now, piece by careful piece, beginning to crack open. It started with Hagrid. Harry had been visiting the gamekeeper regularly since term began, partly because Hagrid was one of the few people in the castle whose emotional signature was exactly what it appeared to be, warm, enormous, guileless as a sunrise, and partly because Hagrid's hut, with its one room and its boarhound and its fire that was always too large, reminded Harry of the best parts of being small. You could sit in Hagrid's chair with a mug of tea that was more sugar than water and a rock cake that could literally chip a tooth, and the world outside, with its mind-reading professors and its dark parasites hiding behind turbans, felt very far away. But Hagrid talked when he was comfortable, and he was always comfortable around Harry. And over the course of several visits, between complaints about students trampling his pumpkin patch and enthusiastic monologues about the mating habits of fire crabs, he'd let things slip. The three-headed dog's name was Fluffy. He belonged to Hagrid. He was guarding something on Dumbledore's orders. Something involving a man named Nicholas Flamel. That last name was the key, and it was Hermione who turned it. She'd found the reference in a book she'd checked out from the library, for light reading, a phrase that, coming from Hermione, could mean anything from a slim pamphlet to a 1,000-page treatise on magical theory. In this case, it was a chocolate frog card. Nicholas Flamel, she announced, slamming a battered copy of Notable Magical Names of Our Time onto the common room table with enough force to make Ron's chess pieces scatter in protest. The only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone. Ron looked blank. Harry looked at Hermione and waited. The Philosopher's Stone, Hermione continued, in the rapid-fire cadence of someone who had been holding in a revelation for hours and was about to burst. It produces the elixir of life, which makes the drinker immortal. Flamel is 665 years old. He and Dumbledore are close associates. And the stone was removed from Gringotts Vault 713 on the same day Hagrid took Harry there to collect it. So the thing under the trapdoor, Ron said slowly, is a stone that makes you live forever. Yes. And someone's trying to steal it. Yes. Ron looked at Harry. Snape. Harry said nothing. This was the moment he'd been dreading, the moment the conversation turned to suspects, and he'd have to decide what to share. Ron and Hermione had built a perfectly logical case against Snape. The man was suspicious by nature and hostile by temperament. He'd been caught by Harry trying to get past Fluffy on Halloween night, resulting in the leg wound. He made a convenient villain, sneering, black-robed, transparently cruel. But he was the wrong villain, and Harry had known it since October. The problem was explaining how he knew. He couldn't say, I can feel Quirrell's mind, and there's something dark living inside it. He couldn't say, Snape's emotional signature, while unpleasant, contains nothing that suggests he's trying to steal the stone. He couldn't reveal his abilities without opening a door he wasn't ready to open, not because he didn't trust Ron and Hermione, but because the knowledge itself was dangerous. If his friends knew what he could do, their behavior would change. They'd guard their thoughts around him, and the easy, unguarded warmth that made their friendship the best thing in Harry's life would curdle into self-consciousness and suspicion. So he compromised. He told the truth sideways. I don't think it's Snape. Ron stared. Mate, he literally got bitten trying to get past the dog, he got bitten trying to stop someone from getting past the dog. Think about it. If Snape wanted the stone, why would he be guarding it? He's one of the people Dumbledore asked to create the protections. How do you know that? Hermione asked, her eyes sharp. Hagrid mentioned it. Each teacher contributed an enchantment. Snape's is one of them. Why would he set up a defense and then try to break through it? This landed. Ron's mouth opened and closed as the logic worked through him. Hermione's expression shifted from skepticism to that particular intensity she got when a new hypothesis was assembling itself in her head. Then who? She asked. Harry looked at his hands. I think it's Quirrell. Silence. Quirrell. Ron said incredulously. The stuttering bloke who faints when someone mentions trolls. That Quirrell. The stutter is fake, Harry said. More silence. Hermione's eyes had gone very wide. Ron was looking at Harry as though he'd suggested the culprit was nearly headless Nick. "Harry," Hermione said carefully. "That's a very serious accusation. What makes you think? I can't explain it. Not all of it. But I've been watching him all year, and something is wrong with him. The troll on Halloween, he let it in. He told us it was in the dungeons, but it was on the first floor. He sent the whole school in the wrong direction so he could go after the stone while everyone was distracted. But Snape went after him," Ron said. "That's how he got bitten." "Exactly. Snape was stopping him, not helping him." Ron and Hermione exchanged a look. Harry could feel the shift in their emotional signatures, skepticism giving way to uncertainty, uncertainty to the dawning, uncomfortable realization that Harry might be right. He'd always been observant. They knew that. They'd watched him read rooms and situations with an accuracy that bordered on the uncanny. And over the months of their friendship, they'd learned to trust his instincts even when they couldn't follow his reasoning. "Even if you're right," Hermione said slowly, "what can we do about it? We're first years. We can't exactly march up to Dumbledore and say, 'We think your defense professor is a criminal mastermind in disguise.' I know. But we can be ready. Whatever Quirrell's planning, he hasn't done it yet. The stone is still safe, the protections are still in place. But if something changes, if he makes a move, we need to be prepared." "Prepared to do what, exactly?" Ron asked. Harry didn't answer. He didn't have an answer yet. But behind his wall, in the vast organized silence of his mind, pieces were arranging themselves with a logic that felt less like strategy and more like prophecy, a pattern forming in the dark, waiting for the final piece to fall. The final piece fell on a Thursday in late May. Harry was leaving the library when he felt it, a spike in Quirrell's dark signal so sharp and so sudden that it was like hearing a scream in a quiet room. He stopped in the corridor, one hand on the wall, and listened. Quirrell was somewhere above him, on the third floor, and the dark consciousness inside him was fully awake, fully alert, burning with an urgency that Harry had never felt before. Something had changed. Something had given Quirrell what he needed. Harry could feel the satisfaction radiating from behind the turban-like heat from an open oven, and beneath it, the cold dark signal was almost singing. The same frequency he'd felt on Halloween night, but stronger, sharper, triumphant. He knows how to get past the protections. Harry's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He turned and walked fast toward Gryffindor Tower, his mind racing. How? What had changed? What could have given Quirrell the final piece of information he needed to bypass every enchantment between the trapdoor and the stone? The answer came to him as he rounded the corner to the fat lady's portrait, and it stopped him cold. Hagrid. Hagrid, who talked too much when he was comfortable. Hagrid, who had told Harry about Fluffy, about Flammel, about the protections. Hagrid, who was the most trusting person Harry had ever met and who would tell a stranger his life story if they bought him a drink and showed an interest in magical creatures. Harry changed direction. He ran, not walked, not hurried, ran, through the castle and out the front doors and across the darkening grounds to Hagrid's hut. Ron and Hermione were in the common room, he'd find them after. Right now, he needed to know what Hagrid had said. And to whom? He hammered on the door. Hagrid opened it, his enormous face creased with surprise and pleasure. "Harry. Wasn't expectin' you tonight. Come in, Hagrid." Harry was breathing hard, and not just from the run. "Have you told anyone how to get past Fluffy?" Hagrid's face went through a complicated series of expressions. "What? No. Course I haven't, the only person who ever asked was," he stopped. The color drained from his face like water from a sink. "Oh. Who, Hagrid?" It was this stranger, down the pub. Few months back. Hooded fella. He had a dragon egg, can you believe it? A real dragon egg, a Norwegian ridgeback, and he said he'd give it to me if I could tell him a few things about my work here at Hogwarts, and one thing led to another, and he asked about the creatures I looked after, and I might have mentioned Fluffy, and he seemed ever so interested, and I might have let slip that the trick to calming Fluffy is just to play him a bit music. The world tilted sideways. Harry grabbed the edge of Hagrid's table for support. Hagrid. This stranger. Did you see his face? Well, no, he kept his hood up the whole time, but it was a pub, lots of people do that. Was there anything unusual about him? Anything at all? Now you mention it. Hagrid's massive brow furrowed. He did seem like he didn't want to take his cloak off. Kept it wrapped around him real tight. And there was a funny smell, like garlic, sort of, garlic. Harry didn't hear anything after that. He was already running back to the castle, the evening air cold in his lungs and his mind working with a clarity that was almost painful in its precision. Quirrell had the last piece. Music, that was all it took to get past Fluffy. And once past Fluffy, it was just the enchantments, and Quirrell had been working on those for months, probably had solutions to most of them already, because he was smart, far smarter than the stuttering fool he pretended to be. He burst into the common room and found Ron and Hermione by the fire, bent over a transfiguration essay. The look on his face silenced whatever greeting they'd been about to offer. "It's tonight," Harry said. "Quirrell's going after the stone tonight." 10 minutes of rapid, urgent conversation. Hermione wanted to go to a teacher. Ron wanted to go to Dumbledore. Harry wanted to agree with both of them, but something was wrong. The hum at the top of the castle, where Dumbledore's steady, constant presence had been burning for months like a lighthouse, was gone. "He's not here," Harry said, and the words tasted like ash. "Dumbledore's not in the castle." Ron went pale. "How do you? I just know. He's gone. Someone's lured him away." Hermione's mouth set in a thin, determined line that bore an uncanny resemblance to McGonagall's. "Then we go to McGonagall." They tried. They found their head of house in her office, told her their suspicions, and were dismissed with a brisk assurance that the stone was perfectly safe and that they should return to their common room immediately. Harry could feel the truth of her confidence. McGonagall genuinely believed the protections were sufficient. She didn't know about Fluffy. She didn't know what Quirrell really was. And she wasn't going to listen to 3 first-years who couldn't explain how they'd obtained their information without revealing a gamekeeper's indiscretion and a boy's impossible mental powers. They walked back to Gryffindor Tower in silence. The corridors were dim and quiet, the castle settling into its evening rhythms. But beneath the surface calm, Harry could feel Quirrell's signal moving, down from the 3rd floor, toward the forbidden corridor, toward the trapdoor. He was going now. Right now. "We have to stop him," Harry said. Ron and Hermione looked at him. In their faces, Harry saw the same thing he felt, fear, yes, but also something harder and brighter and more stubborn. They'd fought a troll together. They'd spent months building something, brick by brick, out of shared meals and late-night conversations and the quiet, accumulated trust of people who had chosen each other. Whatever was down there, they would face it together. "Yeah," Ron said. "I reckon we do." They went. The 3rd-floor corridor was dark and empty, the door to Fluffy's chamber unlocked. Someone had already been through. From beyond the door, Harry could hear music, a harp, enchanted to play itself, its notes drifting through the air in a gentle, soporific melody. Quirrell's work. He'd already neutralized the first obstacle. They slipped through the door. Fluffy was asleep, all 3 heads drooping, massive paws twitching, a river of drool pooling on the stone floor. The trapdoor was open, a square of darkness in the floor that breathed cold, damp air and something older, something that hummed with layered enchantments so dense Harry could feel them pressing against his awareness like pages in a thick book. "Ladies first," Ron said weakly. "Together," Harry said, and jumped. The fall was short and the landing was soft, too soft. Harry hit something that gave beneath him like a living cushion, and immediately felt tendrils wrapping around his ankles, his wrists, his waist. Devil's Snare. The plant was everywhere, a writhing mass of dark green vines that tightened as you struggled, constricting like a serpent around anything warm and moving. Ron panicked. Harry could feel it, a white-hot spike of terror as the vines closed around his chest, cutting off air, squeezing. Hermione was shouting something about sunlight, about heat, about the plant's weakness. But Harry was already calm. Not through effort, through nature. The wall, his mother's love, his impossible unassailable mind, demanded calm the way lungs demanded air. It was simply what he was. And Devil's Snare, which fed on fear and struggled to grip creatures at rest, found nothing to grip. The vines around Harry loosened. Slackened. Withdrew, confused by a victim who radiated the serene warmth of a boy sitting by a fire rather than a boy trapped in a dark hole surrounded by a murderous plant. Harry sank through the mass of tendrils and dropped to the stone floor below, unharmed. "Stop moving," he shouted upward. "Both of you, relax. It only tightens if you fight it." A burst of blue flame from above, Hermione, brilliant Hermione, conjuring fire that the Devil's Snare recoiled from as though burned. The vines retreated with an audible hiss, dropping Ron and Hermione to the floor in an undignified heap. "Everyone all right?" Harry pulled Ron to his feet. "Never better," Ron wheezed. "I love this. Let's do it every weekend." They pressed forward. The next chamber contained flying keys, hundreds of them, swooping and darting around the ceiling like a flock of jeweled birds, their tiny wings glittering in torchlight. A broomstick hovered in the center of the room, and across the far wall, a heavy oak door was locked tight. Harry looked at the keys. He looked at the door. And then he looked at the keys again, not with his eyes but with his other sense, the one that felt magic as texture and intention, and among the swirling multitude, one key stood out, not because of its appearance but because of its signature. It was the same frequency as the lock. Matched. Paired. Like two notes of a chord. "The old one," Harry said, pointing. "Silver, with bent wings. Someone's already grabbed it, it's damaged." He mounted the broom, kicked off, and the world became speed and wind and the pure, uncomplicated joy of flight. The key dodged and darted, but Harry could feel its trajectory before it committed, the same way he'd felt the troll's swing, the same way he'd felt Snape's probes, a half-second of foreknowledge that turned every chase into an interception. He caught it in 30 seconds, dove back to the door, and shoved the key into the lock. The next room was a chessboard. Enormous stone pieces stood on a floor tiled in black and white, each one twice Harry's height, their carved faces blank and impassive. Ron took one look and straightened. His emotional signature shifted, the fear and adrenaline rearranging themselves into something focused and sharp, like a blade being drawn from a sheath. "This is it," Ron said quietly. "This I can do." He directed them like a general. Harry took a bishop's position, Hermione a castle. Ron himself mounted a knight, his jaw set, his eyes moving across the board with the rapid, calculating focus of someone who had been playing chess since he was old enough to hold a piece. Harry could feel Ron's mind working, not the specifics, but the shape of his strategy, a cascading architecture of if-then-else that was more complex than anything Harry had sensed from his friend before. Ron Weasley, who struggled with essays and forgot homework and thought he was the least talented member of his family, was, in this moment, operating at a level of strategic brilliance that would have impressed a grandmaster. The game was brutal. The opposing pieces showed no mercy, captured pieces were dragged off the board with a violence that made the ground shake. Hermione flinched every time. Harry watched the opposing queen, a massive stone figure with a face like a carved glacier, and tracked her patterns, feeding what he sensed to Ron in quick, clipped updates. "She's going to go for the knight on f3. How do you, never mind. Right, then we move the pawn to," it worked. Harry's reads and Ron's strategy meshed like gears in a machine, and piece by piece, the opposing side was dismantled. But they were losing pieces too, and as the endgame approached, Harry felt the moment Ron saw the winning move, and the cost. Ron's emotional signature went cold. Quiet. Resolved. Ron, Harry started. I have to sacrifice myself, Ron said. His voice was steady, but Harry could feel the fear beneath it, bright and hot and thoroughly, completely overridden by something stronger. Loyalty. Love. The unshakable, primary color devotion of a boy who had decided, somewhere between the troll and the chessboard, that his friends' lives mattered more than his own. No, Hermione whispered. It's the only way. Once the Queen takes me, Harry's free to checkmate the King. Ron looked at Harry. His freckled face was pale but set. Don't waste it. Get the stone. Stop Quirrell. And Harry, a grin, sudden and fierce and so thoroughly Ron that it made Harry's chest ache. Don't you dare lose. He moved his knight forward. The White Queen turned. Her stone arm swung. Ron hit the ground and didn't get up. Hermione screamed. Harry caught her arm and held her back, his eyes on the board, his mind already 2 moves ahead. He's alive, he said, and he could feel it, Ron's consciousness dimming but present, a golden glow turned low. He's knocked out, but he's alive. Hermione. I need you to stay with him. Harry, I can't let you go alone, you need to stay with him. When he wakes up, get out. Get to the Ollery, send an owl to Dumbledore. Tell him everything. Hermione's eyes were bright with tears, but her jaw was set and her emotional signature was blazing with that fierce, indomitable will that lived beneath her anxiety like iron beneath rust. She nodded once, sharply. Be careful. Harry moved his piece. Checkmate. The White King threw down his crown with a clang that echoed through the chamber, and the door beyond the board swung open. Harry walked through alone. The next room stank. A mountain troll, even bigger than the one on Halloween, lay face down on the floor, already unconscious. Quirrell's work again, and recent, Harry could feel the residual signature of the spell that had felled it, laced with that dark secondary frequency that made his skin crawl. He stepped over the troll's outstretched arm and moved on. The next chamber held fire. The moment Harry crossed the threshold, purple flames sprang up behind him and black flames filled the doorway ahead, cutting off both retreat and advance. A table in the center held 7 bottles of varying sizes and a scroll of parchment. Harry unrolled the scroll. It was a logic puzzle, 7 bottles, one of which would carry the drinker safely through the black flames, one of which would send them back through the purple, and the rest of which were wine or poison. Hermione would have loved this. Harry read the clues twice, then set the parchment down and did something he couldn't have explained to anyone. He closed his eyes and felt the bottles. 7 signatures. 2 of them neutral, wine, mundane, magically inert. 2 of them sharp and hostile, poison, designed to kill. And 3 of them active, enchanted, humming with purpose. Harry's wall filtered the information with its usual effortless precision, sorting the signatures by type and intent, and within seconds he knew, the smallest bottle, the one on the far right, would carry him forward. The round one at the left end would take him back. He picked up the smallest bottle. There was barely a swallow left, Quirrell had already drunk most of it. Harry drained what remained, felt a wash of cold spread through his body like ice water through his veins, and walked through the black flames. The final chamber was smaller than he'd expected, circular, with a vaulted ceiling that disappeared into shadow. Torches burned in brackets on the walls, casting flickering orange light across stone that was old enough to remember the founders. And in the center of the room, standing before a mirror Harry recognized with a jolt that went through him like lightning, was Quirinus Quirrell. No stutter. No trembling. No performance. Quirrell stood straight and still, his turban slightly askew, his pale face lit by torchlight and twisted with an expression that Harry had never seen on it before, focused, calculating, intelligent concentration. His wand was in his hand, aimed at the mirror of Ariste, and his lips were moving in a whispered incantation that Harry couldn't hear but could feel, a probing spell, designed to extract the mirror's secrets. He wasn't stuttering. He wasn't flinching. And his emotional signature, the surface one, the weak and trembling and fake one, was gone entirely, discarded like a mask at the end of a masquerade. What was left was the real Quirrell, cold, ambitious, desperate, and thoroughly, completely dominated by the dark consciousness that burned at the back of his skull like an ember in ash. Harry stood in the doorway and felt the dark signal lock onto him like a searchlight. Quirrell turned. His eyes were different without the stutter to soften them, sharp, assessing, the eyes of a man who had traveled the world seeking power and found it in the worst possible place. Potter. No stutter. No pretense. The word was flat and matter-of-fact, the greeting of someone who had expected this interruption and found it tiresome. I wondered if you'd come. You knew. Of course I knew. You've been watching me all year with those green eyes, and I've been watching you right back. You think I didn't notice? The boy who flinched every time I entered a room, who tracked me at meals, who knew, somehow, impossibly, that I was more than what I appeared. Quirrell smiled. It was thin and bitter and utterly without warmth. You felt him, didn't you? My master. Behind the turban. You felt him since the first day. Harry said nothing. His wall was humming, not the usual steady pulse but something more active, more vigilant, like a fortress raising its drawbridge. The dark signal from behind Quirrell's turban was fully awake now, pressing against the edges of Harry's awareness with a force and intent that dwarfed anything he'd felt before. This wasn't Snape's academic curiosity or Dumbledore's gentle probing. This was a predator's focus, ancient, malevolent, infinitely patient, and now, for the first time since Halloween night, aimed directly at him. He wants to meet you, Quirrell said. He's been waiting. I know what he is, Harry said. His voice was steady. The wall made sure of that. And I know what you're trying to do. You're after the Philosopher's Stone. Very good. And I would have it already, if not for this cursed mirror. Quirrell gestured at the mirror of Eriste with frustrated disgust. I see myself presenting the stone to my master. I see him restored to power, to glory. But the mirror won't give it to me. Dumbledore's final enchantment, the stone can only be claimed by someone who wants to find it, not use it. He turned back to Harry, and something shifted in his expression. Something calculating. But you, Potter. You're different. The mirror showed you your parents last time, didn't it? Your heart's desire is not power. It's not immortality. Perhaps the mirror would show you something else. I'm not helping you. Oh, I think you will. Quirrell's voice dropped, and the dark signal behind his turban surged, a wave of malevolent pressure that slammed against Harry's wall with enough force to make the torches gutter. Harry staggered. Not because the wall was breached, it wasn't, it could never be, but because the sheer power behind the assault was staggering, a tidal wave of dark intent crashing against a cliff face. My master insists. Your master, Harry said through gritted teeth, can go to hell. A sound from behind the turban. Not a word. A hiss, thin, serpentine, ancient, carrying a fury so concentrated it had its own gravity. The dark signal shifted, reorganized, and Harry felt Quirrell's will crumble like wet paper as the thing behind the turban seized control. Let me speak to him, whispered the voice. Face to face. Quirrell's hands went to his turban. They were shaking, his own hands, for the first time all night, trembling with genuine terror. Whatever deal he'd struck, whatever bargain had placed this thing inside his skull, the reality of it still horrified him. Harry could feel the remnants of the real Quirrell, the ambitious, foolish, ultimately human man who had gone looking for power and found damnation instead, screaming behind the dark consciousness that now drove his body like a puppet. The turban unwound. Fell to the floor in loops of purple cloth. Quirrell turned around slowly, showing Harry the back of his head. Harry had thought he was ready. He'd felt the dark signal for months, had catalogued its frequency, had prepared himself intellectually for whatever was generating it. But nothing, No amount of passive perception, no degree of mental fortification, could have prepared him for the face. It was pressed into the back of Quirrell's skull like a death mask pushed into clay. Chalk white. Flat-nosed, the nostrils slitted like a snake's. Lips thin as paper cuts. And the eyes, red, burning, lit from within by a light that had nothing to do with life, were fixed on Harry with an intelligence so vast and so malevolent that it was like staring into the heat of a dying star. Lord Voldemort. Or what was left of him. A face without a body, a mind without a form, parasitically fused to the back of a man's skull, sustained by unicorn blood and dark magic and a will that had refused death with a stubbornness that bordered on the cosmic. "Harry Potter," said the face. The voice was a whisper, but it filled the chamber the way smoke fills a room, everywhere, inescapable, intimate. "We meet again." Harry's scar exploded. The pain was blinding, a white-hot lance driven through his forehead, so intense that his vision whited out and his knees buckled. But the wall absorbed it. Harry felt the pain hit his shields and spread, distributed across the vast architecture of his mental defenses the way a bridge distributes the weight of a load, and what should have been incapacitating became merely agonizing. He stayed on his feet. "Barely." "Brave," Voldemort whispered. "Just like your parents. Your father was brave too. He died on his feet, if that's any comfort. And your mother, your mother. She needn't have died. I gave her the chance to step aside. She chose to die for you instead." The red eyes glittered. "A foolish choice. Love. The most overrated force in the universe." "She'd disagree," Harry said. Voldemort's lipless mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any human warmth. "Yes. She would. And look what her love has wrought." The red eyes narrowed. "I've been trying to reach you all year, boy. Whispering through the cracks, testing the boundaries. And every single time, I've been met with a wall so vast, so absolute, that even I cannot fathom its depths." The dark signal surged again, not a probe this time but a full assault, a battering ram of psychic force that hit Harry's wall with the accumulated power of the darkest wizard who had ever lived. The torches blew out. The chamber plunged into darkness lit only by Voldemort's red eyes and the faint, impossible glow emanating from Harry's scar. The pressure was immense, not just against Harry's mind but against the room itself, reality bending under the weight of Voldemort's will. The wall held. It didn't just hold, it answered. Harry felt the access denied response trigger, not as a message this time but as a force, a counter-pressure that pushed back against Voldemort's assault with calm, measured, devastating power. The dark consciousness recoiled. The red eyes widened. And in the moment of contact, in the instant where the darkest magic in the world met the purest, Harry felt Voldemort's mind brush against his mother's love, and the result was not a clash but a combustion. Voldemort screamed. The sound was inhuman, a shriek of fury and pain and something underneath that Harry recognized with a shock of understanding, fear. Lord Voldemort, the most feared wizard in history, the man who had conquered death itself, was afraid. Not of Harry. Not of the wall. Of what the wall was made of. Of the love that he had never understood and that burned him now the way sunlight burned a creature that had lived too long in the dark. "What are you?" Voldemort shrieked, and the words tore through the chamber like a physical force, cracking stone and sending fragments of rock raining from the ceiling. The red eyes blazed with a mixture of rage and incomprehension so total that it bordered on madness. "What is this power? What did she do?" Harry stood in the dark, his scar burning, his wall blazing with a warmth that filled every cell of his body, and looked into the red eyes of the thing that had murdered his parents. "She loved me," Harry said. And Voldemort, the most powerful Occlumens in history, the Dark Lord who had broken 1,000 minds, looked at the 11-year-old boy with the impenetrable mind and the eyes of the woman he'd killed, and for the first time in his long and terrible existence, found something he could not break, could not understand, and could not overcome. The chamber was silent except for the drip of water and the rasp of Voldemort's breathing through Quirrell's mouth. "Get the stone," Voldemort hissed at Quirrell. "Use the boy. Make him look in the mirror." Quirrell's body turned. His hands reached for Harry. And the moment his fingers touched Harry's skin, the same magic that protected Harry's mind protected his body. Quirrell's hands blistered and burned, and the man screamed and stumbled backward, staring at his ruined palms with horror. "Seize him!" Voldemort shrieked. Harry didn't run. He stepped forward, toward the mirror, and his eyes found the glass. His reflection looked back at him, pale, scarred, small, standing in a dark chamber beneath a castle, facing the thing that had destroyed his family. And as he watched, his reflection smiled, reached into its pocket, and pulled out a blood-red stone. His reflection winked, and slipped the stone back into its pocket. Harry felt a weight appear in his real pocket. Heavy. Warm. Real. He had the stone. Quirrell lunged. His burned hands closed around Harry's throat, and agony erupted through both of them, Harry's scar screaming, Quirrell's flesh blistering and cracking and disintegrating where it touched Harry's skin. But Quirrell held on, driven by Voldemort's will, his ruined fingers tightening even as they fell apart, and Harry grabbed Quirrell's wrists and held on too, because every point of contact was another point of destruction, and the love that lived in Harry's skin and his mind and his wall was eating Quirrell alive. Quirrell screamed. The sound went on, rising in pitch, and beneath it, Voldemort was screaming too, a duet of agony that filled the chamber and shook the foundations of the castle. Harry's vision was going dark. The pain in his scar was beyond anything he'd ever experienced, beyond anything the wall could fully absorb, and as Quirrell's fingers finally crumbled to ash against his throat, Harry felt himself falling backward into a darkness that was warm and soft and impossibly, unmistakably gentle. The last thing he heard, before consciousness left him, was not Voldemort screaming. It was a voice, quiet, feminine, achingly familiar, whispering through every layer of his wall, "You're safe, sweetheart. I've got you. You're safe." Then there was nothing. Then there was nothing for a very long time. Chapter 6, Access Granted. He drifted. There was no darkness, not exactly. No light either. Just a vast, warm, formless space that existed somewhere between sleep and something deeper, a place where thought dissolved into sensation and time lost its edges. Harry floated in it the way a leaf floats on still water, barely moving, barely breathing, held aloft by something that had no name but felt like arms. The wall was there. Of course the wall was there, it was always there, had always been there, would always be there. But he was seeing it differently now. Not from the outside, not as a barrier or a shield or a fortress. He was inside it. Woven into its structure like a thread in tapestry, and from here, from this deep, interior vantage point, he could see what it really was. Not a wall. Not a shield. Not a fortress. A mother's arms. The architecture of his mental defenses, viewed from within, was not stone or steel or anything so crude. It was warmth. Layer upon layer of warmth, each one distinct, each one a different expression of the same fundamental force. The outermost layer was fierce, a blazing, protective fire that burned anything hostile on contact. Beneath that, a layer of calm, steady, patient, unshakable, the kind of calm that came from absolute certainty. Beneath that, a layer of tenderness so pure and so heartbreaking that touching it made Harry's soul ache with a grief that was also, somehow, the most perfect joy he'd ever known. And at the center, at the very core of the structure, so deep that no Legillemens had ever come close to detecting it, a voice. Not words. Not language. Just a presence, as familiar as his own heartbeat, murmuring a constant, unbroken stream of love that had been running since the night Lily Potter stepped between her son and a killing curse and poured every atom of her being into a single, impossible wish: let him live. She was still here. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, not as an echo. As a force. A living enchantment, woven into her son's consciousness with a skill that transcended anything the magical world had ever produced, because it hadn't been produced at all. It had been given. Freely, completely, without reservation or condition. The purest expression of love in the history of magic, and it had been burning for 10 years inside a boy who slept in a cupboard and never knew he was carrying a son. Harry reached for it. The presence reached back. And for one shimmering, eternal moment, he felt his mother's love not as protection, not as power, not as the impenetrable shield that had baffled Snape and Dumbledore and Voldemort himself, but as what it had always been. A hug. Wake up, sweetheart. They're waiting for you. Harry opened his eyes. White. Blinding, sterile, institutional white, ceiling, walls, sheets, all of it bleached and scrubbed and smelling of something herbal and antiseptic. The hospital wing. He was lying in a bed near the windows, afternoon sunlight streaming across his face, and every muscle in his body felt like it had been wrung out and hung up to dry. His glasses were on the bedside table. He fumbled for them, shoved them on, and the world sharpened into focus. White beds in neat rows. Curtains half drawn. A table beside him piled with what appeared to be the entire stock of honeydukes, chocolate frogs, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, boxes of crystallized pineapple, a truly alarming number of cauldron cakes. Cards. Dozens of cards, handmade and store-bought, from people he'd never met and people he had. And at the foot of his bed, sitting in a chair that was slightly too small for him and looking as though he'd been there for quite some time, Albus Dumbledore. The headmaster was wearing robes of deep midnight blue embroidered with silver moons, and his half-moon spectacles were perched on the end of his long nose, catching the light. He was watching Harry with an expression that held none of his usual theatrical twinkle, just a quiet, steady regard, patient and open and profoundly tired. "Good afternoon, Harry." Harry's throat was raw. He swallowed, winced, and managed. "How long?" 3 days. Madame Pomfrey was beginning to get worried, though I assured her you were simply processing. Your friends have been most anxious. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger have attempted to storm the hospital wing no fewer than 6 times. I believe Madame Pomfrey has threatened to sedate them. Harry almost smiled. He could feel them, faintly, through the hospital wing walls, 2 familiar signatures burning like candles in a nearby room. Ron's gold and Hermione's electric blue, both laced with worry and relief and the particular impatience of people who had been told to wait and were very bad at it. Quirrell, Harry said. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Professor Quirrell is dead. The damage to his body was extensive. Voldemort's possession, combined with the effect of your mother's protection, left nothing that could be sustained. And Voldemort? Gone. Fled. A wraith once more, bodiless and diminished, driven from Quirrell's dying form by the same love that has protected you since infancy. Dumbledore paused. He is not destroyed, Harry. I must be honest with you about that. He will find other hosts, other means of clinging to existence. But today, because of you, he is weaker than he has been in a decade. Harry absorbed this. The wall hummed softly, processing, filing, the way it always did when new information arrived. The stone. Destroyed. Nicholas and I had a conversation, long overdue, frankly, and agreed that it was too dangerous to exist. Nicholas and Perenelle have enough elixir to set their affairs in order, and then they will die. Dumbledore said this with a gentleness that carried no judgment, only a deep, old sadness. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. You destroyed it because of what happened. I destroyed it because it should have been destroyed years ago. Your experience merely provided the necessary catalyst for a decision I had been too sentimental to make. A faint, self-deprecating smile. Even headmasters have their weaknesses. Harry looked at Dumbledore. Really looked at him, not just with his eyes but with everything, the full weight of his perception, honed over months of practice, tuned to a sensitivity that could read the emotional landscape of a room the way a musician reads a score. And what he found in Dumbledore surprised him. Guilt. Deep, structural, load-bearing guilt, the kind that had been there so long it had become part of the man's architecture, integrated into his personality the way Snape's grief was integrated into his. Dumbledore felt responsible. Not just for the stone, not just for Quirrell, but for Harry. For placing him at the Dursleys. For leaving him unmonitored for 10 years. For bringing him to a school where a fragment of the darkest wizard in history was riding a professor's skull. For every decision that had led to an 11-year-old boy standing alone in a dark chamber, facing a monster, while the adults who should have protected him were somewhere else entirely. Dumbledore felt all of this, and he was trying, with the practiced skill of a man who had been managing his own emotional landscape for a century and a half, to keep it from showing. Harry could have let it go. Could have accepted the explanations, eaten a chocolate frog, and let Dumbledore retreat behind his twinkle and his lemon drops and his carefully constructed persona of benevolent omniscience. It would have been easier. Safer. The path of least resistance. But Harry had walked through fire and devil's snare and a chess game that had nearly killed his best friend, and he had stood before Voldemort and survived, and he was done, thoroughly, completely, permanently done, with letting the adults in his life control the terms of their relationship with him. "I need to ask you some things," Harry said. "And I need you to actually answer." Dumbledore regarded him over his spectacles. A long moment passed. The sunlight shifted across the white sheets. Somewhere in the castle, a clock chimed 3. "I think," Dumbledore said slowly, "that you have earned that right. Ask. You tried to read my mind. The night you invited me for tea. You tried 3 times. It wasn't a question, but Dumbledore answered anyway. Yes. Why? Because Severus had told me what he'd found, or rather, what he couldn't find, and I needed to confirm it for myself. And because I was afraid. The admission cost him something, Harry could feel it, a flicker of vulnerability quickly suppressed. You arrived at this school carrying protections I did not place, could not understand, and had no way to monitor. I needed to know whether those protections were stable. Whether they posed a danger to you or to others. Whether the magic that had saved your life might also be changing you. And what did you find? Nothing. A ghost of a smile. Absolutely nothing. Your mind is the most completely shielded I have ever encountered, and I have encountered a great many minds over a great many years. I could not read you, could not sense you, could not determine so much as your surface mood. You were, and remain, a perfect enigma. That scared you. Terrified me, Dumbledore corrected gently. I am accustomed to understanding the people around me. It is, I confess, a habit that borders on addiction. When I encountered a mind I could not read, the mind of the single most important child in our world, I was forced to confront a deeply uncomfortable truth. What truth? That I cannot protect what I cannot see. That I had spent 10 years assuming Harry Potter was safe, growing up in obscurity, shielded by his mother's love and the blood wards I had placed around his home, and I had never once checked whether those assumptions were correct. I had never visited. Never looked. Never asked. Dumbledore's voice was quiet now, stripped of its usual musicality, bare and honest in a way that made Harry's chest tighten. Your aunt and uncle. They were not kind to you. It wasn't a question. No, Harry said. They weren't. I suspected. When you arrived at Hogwarts, thin, undersized, wearing clothes 3 sizes too large, flinching at sudden movements, I suspected. And Severus, though he would deny it under torture, suspected too. He recognized the signs. He had. A pause. He had personal experience. Harry filed this away. Another piece of the Snape puzzle, clicking into place. I placed you there because the blood wards, the protection derived from your mother's sacrifice, channeled through her sister's blood, were the strongest safeguard I could provide against Voldemort's followers. And they were effective. No Death Eater ever found you. No dark wizard ever harmed you. But the protections I chose against magical threats left you vulnerable to mundane ones, and that. Dumbledore's voice caught. Just for a second, just a breath, but Harry felt the guilt surge beneath the old man's composure like magma beneath a thin crust. That is a failure I will carry for the rest of my life. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had reached a place of honesty and were taking a moment to stand in it, to feel its weight and its texture, before deciding what to build there. "I'm not angry," Harry said, and was surprised to find that it was true. The wall pulsed, his mother's love, affirming, accepting, letting him feel what he felt without judgment. "I'm not angry, Professor. But I need you to understand something. Tell me. My mind is mine." The words came from the same place as the wall, deep, foundational, bedrock level certain. "Whatever's in here, my mum's protection, the occlumency, the ability to feel what other people feel, it's mine. Not yours to study. Not Snape's to probe. Not anyone's to use or control or direct. I'll share what I choose to share, with who I choose to share it with, when I choose to share it. But nobody gets in without my permission. Not ever again." Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. The blue eyes were bright, not with the twinkle, but with something rawer and more real. Emotion. Genuine, unperformative emotion, held in check by a lifetime of discipline but visible, just barely, at the edges. "Your mother said something very similar to me once," Dumbledore said softly. "The night I told her about the prophecy. She looked at me with those green eyes, your eyes, Harry, and she said, 'My family is not your chess piece, Albus. If you want our help, you'll ask. And you'll accept the answer we give you.' I did not fully listen then. I heard the words, but I did not absorb their meaning. I continued to move pieces on a board, telling myself that the greater good required it, that the war demanded sacrifices, that I knew best." He leaned forward. His long fingers were laced together, and Harry noticed, for the first time, that the old man's hands were not entirely steady. "I am listening now, Harry. If you want to know what I'm thinking, about you, about Voldemort, about anything, you will have to ask. And I will answer, to the best of my ability, with the truth. Not because you can read my mind, but because you have earned it." He extended his hand across the bed. Not for a handshake, for an agreement. A pact between two people who had decided, in this sunlit hospital wing, to treat each other as equals rather than as pieces on a board. Harry took it. Dumbledore's grip was warm, firm, and carried not a whisper of legitimacy. Just contact. Just an old man and a young one, shaking hands across a pile of sweets, agreeing to trust each other with their eyes open. "Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Harry. For rather more than you know." Dumbledore released his hand and sat back, and the twinkle, that insufferable, irrepressible, fundamentally decent twinkle, crept back into his eyes like sunlight through a crack. "Now. I believe there are two young people in the corridor who will shortly begin tunneling through the wall if I don't release them. Shall I? Please." Dumbledore stood, crossed to the door, and opened it. The sound that came through was immediate and overwhelming, Ron's voice saying, "Is he awake?" "He's awake, isn't he?" "I told you he was awake, Hermione." I could hear him talking, and Hermione's voice saying, "Move, Ronald, you're blocking the," and then they were both through the door and across the room and Ron was grabbing Harry's shoulder and Hermione was hugging him so hard he couldn't breathe, and the hum, the constant, ambient symphony of human emotion that Harry had been listening to for 9 months, swelled to a crescendo of golden warmth and electric blue relief and the unmistakable, uncontainable, impossibly beautiful noise of two people who loved him. He hugged Hermione back. He gripped Ron's arm. And behind the wall, inside the wall, woven through the wall like light through crystal, something that was and was not Lily Potter felt her son's joy and burned a little brighter. Dumbledore watched from the doorway. His face held an expression that Harry, had he been looking, would have recognized as the particular pain of a man who had spent too long seeing people as pieces and was only now remembering that they were people. He closed the door softly and left them alone. Ron had a bandage around his head from the chess game and a bruise on his jaw that he wore like a medal. Hermione had dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept properly since they'd gone through the trapdoor. They sat on the edges of Harry's bed and talked over each other in the urgent, tumbling way of people with too much to say and not enough breath to say it, and Harry listened, and felt, and let the warmth of them soak through him like sunlight through glass. And McGonagall apologized. Harry, can you believe it? Actually apologized for not listening to us. I thought Ron was going to faint. I was not going to faint, Hermione. I was surprised. There's a difference, and the whole school knows. Not the details, Dumbledore kept those quiet, but everyone knows you went after the stone and stopped you-know-who. You should see the Slytherin table. They look like someone cancelled Christmas. Malfoy's been dead quiet for 3 days. It's been the best 3 days of term, and Neville tried to stop us going through the portrait hole. He stood up to us, Harry, actually tried to physically block the door. I felt terrible about stunning him, but, we should tell Dumbledore about that. Neville deserves points. He does. He really does. They talked until the light changed and the hospital wing grew dim and golden with evening. Ron recounted the chess game with the breathless excitement of someone who had discovered, in the worst possible circumstances, that he was extraordinary at the thing he loved most. Hermione walked Harry through the logic puzzle, which she'd worked out from Harry's description in approximately 10 seconds, confirming his suspicion that she would have loved it, and then interrogated him about the final chamber with a forensic intensity that suggested she was already composing a research paper in her head. Harry told them almost everything. The mirror. Quirrell's transformation. Voldemort's face. The moment the stone had appeared in his pocket. The burning touch and Quirrell's disintegration. He told them about the pain in his scar and the screaming and the fall into darkness. He didn't tell them about the voice. His mother's voice, murmuring through the wall as he fell. That was his. Private. Sacred. But he told them something else. Something he'd been carrying alone for months, hoarding it behind his wall like a miser hoarding gold, because he'd been afraid that sharing it would change things, would make them look at him differently, would break the fragile, precious normality of having friends who saw him as Harry, just Harry, and not as a freak or a weapon or a puzzle to be solved. There's something about me that I haven't told you, he said. Ron and Hermione went quiet. The hospital wing was empty except for the 3 of them. Madame Pomfrey had been chased out by Dumbledore earlier and hadn't returned. The evening light painted everything amber and soft. I can feel what people are feeling, Harry said. Not thoughts, not exact thoughts. But emotions. Intentions. When someone's lying, when they're afraid, when they're angry or happy or hiding something. I've been able to do it since I got to Hogwarts, and it's been getting stronger all year. Silence. Ron and Hermione looked at each other. Harry braced himself for the reaction, the fear, the discomfort, the self-conscious retreat of people who had just learned that their every emotion had been overheard. Is that how you knew about Quirrell? Hermione asked. Yes. And how you knew the troll wasn't in the dungeons? Yes. And how you always know when I'm lying about finishing my homework? Ron asked. Harry blinked. Yes. Ron considered this for approximately 3 seconds. Fair enough, he said, and reached for a chocolate frog. Harry stared at him. That's it? Fair enough. Mate, you just fought you-know-who and won. You can read feelings. At this point, if you told me you could fly without a broom, I'd just ask for a ride. Ron bit the head off the chocolate frog and chewed thoughtfully. Does this mean you know I fancy? I am not answering that question. Right. Probably for the best. Hermione's reaction was more complex. Harry could feel her processing, her brilliant mind running through implications and possibilities and concerns at a speed that was almost visible. But the dominant note in her emotional signature was not fear or discomfort. It was understanding. "That's why you're always so quiet," she said softly. "You're listening. All the time. It must be overwhelming." It was at first. "I'm better at managing it now." "And the thing in your mind, the shield. The thing that keeps Snape and Dumbledore out. That's related?" "I think they're two sides of the same coin. My mum's protection. It keeps people out, and it lets me sense things. Feel things." Hermione nodded slowly. Her eyes were bright, and Harry could feel her restraining 1,000 questions through sheer force of will. "We should research this. There might be precedents, ancient magical protections that grant enhanced perception. I've read about Hermione. Sympathetic resonance in protective enchantments, and there's a theory about love-based magic creating empathic bonds that, Hermione." She stopped. Looked at him. "Thank you," Harry said. "For not being weird about it." Her face softened. "Harry. You're our friend. Nothing you could tell us would change that. Besides," a small, mischievous smile that reminded Harry, not for the first time, that Hermione Granger had been sorted into Gryffindor for a reason. "It explains why you're rubbish at poker. You always know when everyone's bluffing, so you never bother learning to bluff yourself." "We've never played poker." "I know. I'm saying we shouldn't start." Ron snorted. Harry laughed, a real laugh, full and unguarded, the kind that came from the belly and shook the shoulders and left you feeling lighter than air. And in that moment, in the amber light of the hospital wing, with his two best friends sitting on his bed and the ruins of a chocolate frog scattered across the sheets and the wall humming warm and steady behind his eyes, Harry felt something settle inside him. A decision. A commitment. He was done hiding. Not from everyone, the world didn't need to know what he could do, and Voldemort certainly didn't need any more information about the boy who had survived him twice. But from these two, from the people who had walked through fire with him, who had sacrificed a night and solved a puzzle and stood between him and the dark, from Ron and Hermione, he would hold nothing back. The wall was his mother's love. The wall was his shield. The wall was the most powerful mental defense in the history of magic. But love, Harry was learning, was not just about keeping people out. It was about choosing who to let in. The last week of term passed in a blur of exams Harry barely remembered taking and results he barely cared about. The castle was buzzing with end-of-year energy, the grounds lush and green with early summer, the air sweet with the smell of cut grass and the faint, distant promise of freedom. Gryffindor won the House Cup. Dumbledore's last-minute points, 50 to Ron for the best-played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, 50 to Hermione for the use of cool logic in the face of fire, 60 to Harry for pure nerve and outstanding courage, and 10 to Neville Longbottom for standing up to his friends, which Dumbledore noted takes a great deal of bravery, pushed them past Slytherin at the last moment. And the Great Hall erupted in a roar of scarlet and gold that Harry felt reverberating through the hum like a symphony reaching its final chord. Malfoy's fury was incandescent and satisfying. Snape's expression was complicated, outward displeasure, because his Slytherins had been robbed, but underneath, a faint pulse of something he would have denied under Veritaserum. Pride. Not in Gryffindor, never in Gryffindor. In the boy with the green eyes who had faced the Dark Lord and walked out alive. Harry caught Snape's eye across the hall. Just for a second, just a glance, but in that fraction of a moment, the wall did something subtle, not the explosive memory cascade of the detention, but a small, deliberate pulse of acknowledgement. I see you. I know what you did. Thank you. Snape looked away. But the corner of his mouth twitched, upward, infinitesimally, and the pride in his signature burned a fraction brighter. The morning of departure, Harry stood at the window of his dormitory and looked out across the grounds. The lake glittered under a June sun. The forbidden forest was a dark, mysterious line on the horizon. Hagrid's hut sat at the edge of the trees, chimney smoking as always, and somewhere inside, a very large man with a very large heart was probably crying into his very large handkerchief about the students leaving. The hum of the castle was changing. 200 minds preparing for departure, each one lit up with a unique combination of excitement and nostalgia and the bittersweet awareness that something was ending. Harry let it wash over him, not filtering, not sorting, just feeling, the full, rich, chaotic symphony of human experience that he'd been living inside for 9 months. He pressed his hand to the window glass. It was cool against his palm. On the other side, the world waited, the Dursleys, the summer, the long, quiet weeks of being ordinary. But he wasn't ordinary, and he never would be again. He was the boy with the wall. The boy who heard feelings and survived killing curses and carried his dead mother's love like a sun inside his skull. And Voldemort was out there. Bodiless, diminished, but alive, a wraith of hatred and ambition clinging to existence with a stubbornness that would eventually find a way back. Harry could feel it, not as a specific perception but as a certainty that lived in the deepest layers of his wall, in the part of his mother's protection that was not just a shield but a warning. The danger was not over. It had barely begun. But that was next year's problem. Today, Harry had friends. Today, Harry had a home, not Privet Drive, never Privet Drive, but this castle, these people, this life that had cracked open like a geode 9 months ago and revealed a world of magic and terror and love that he was only beginning to understand. He picked up his trunk and went downstairs. The Hogwarts Express was scarlet and gleaming, belching steam across platform 9 3/4 with the theatrical enthusiasm of a train that enjoyed its job. Harry found a compartment with Ron and Hermione and Neville, and they settled in with the comfortable familiarity of people who had earned each other's company through trial and fire and troll. Ron was already talking about the summer, Quidditch in the orchard, his mother's cooking, the possibility of Harry visiting the Burrow. Hermione was making a reading list that was longer than most people's summer holiday. Neville was showing them a rare plant his grandmother had sent as a congratulations gift, which appeared to be humming softly and leaning toward the window. Harry sat by the glass and watched the countryside scroll past, green fields, grey towns, the slow, familiar landscape of a world that didn't know it contained magic. The hum was quieter here, away from the castle, reduced to the 4 minds in the compartment and the distant murmur of students in other carriages. It was peaceful. Almost normal. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass and closed his eyes. Behind his wall, in the vast, warm, luminous architecture of his mother's love, something stirred. Not a voice, not a message. Just a feeling, a sense of something watching over him, steady and patient and infinite, the way the sky watches over the earth. I'll be ready, Harry thought. Whatever comes next. Whoever comes next. I'll be ready. The wall pulsed. Once. Like a heartbeat. Like a promise. The train carried him south, toward summer, toward a world that thought he was just a boy, and behind his green eyes, the most powerful mind in the wizarding world watched the fields pass and smiled, and was not afraid. He was 11 years old. He was skinny and scarred and going back to a cupboard under the stairs. But he was loved, by a mother who had died for him, by friends who would fight for him, by a castle that had welcomed him, and by a wall that would stand between him and the dark for as long as darkness dared to try. His mind was his own. And the door was open, not to anyone who demanded entry, not to any force that tried to take it by storm, but to the people who had earned it. The people he chose. The people who knocked gently and waited, and who understood that access, when granted freely, was worth infinitely more than access taken by force. The Hogwarts Express whistled. The countryside blurred. And Harry Potter, the boy behind the wall, the level 99 Occlumens who didn't know he was one, the son of a woman whose love had rewritten the rules of magic itself, rode the train home with his friends beside him and his mother's arms around his mind and the whole impossible, terrifying, beautiful future stretching out before him like a road with no end. Access granted. On his terms. Always.